Picture a building, not a grand one, not a cathedral, not a palace, not one of those elegant townhouses you've seen in period dramas where everyone has cheekbones and cravats and problems that can be solved by a good horseback ride. Picture the opposite of that. Picture a building that was designed at some point in the distant past to house maybe 4 families. A modest place. 2 rooms per floor, a staircase that functioned, a yard out back with a pump, and perhaps a small garden. Now fill it with 40 people. Now remove the garden, build over the yard, stack another floor on top, subdivide the rooms with thin partitions made of salvaged wood and prayers. Put a family in every partition. Put 2 families in the larger ones. Stack the children like firewood near the walls. Now remove the working pump. Replace it with a different pump. One that sits innocently on a street corner 3 doors down. One that looks perfectly normal. One that everyone in the neighbourhood uses every single day because it's the closest clean water source, or what everyone believes is clean water, which is not quite the same thing. Add the smell. That comes first. Always. Before the sounds, before the sights. The smell arrives the moment you step within 50 feet of the building. Rotting timber, boiled cabbage from 6 different pots on 6 different fires, unwashed wool, the particular sweetness of a chamber pot that hasn't been emptied since yesterday. Human bodies, too many in too small a space. The faint chemical sharpness of lye soap someone used optimistically 2 days ago. And underneath it all, underneath everything, something else. Something that doesn't have a name yet in 1854. Something you cannot see or smell directly, but that will, within the next 7 days, kill 127 of your neighbours. That's Soho. Specifically, that's the neighbourhood clustered around Broad Street, Golden Square, London. Population, approximately 11,000 people per square mile, which makes it one of the most densely packed neighbourhoods in one of the most densely packed cities in the world. That's where you live. That's where you're going tonight. Now. I make these history stories, and honestly I have no idea if you fall asleep to them, or if you just find the idea of invisible death in contaminated water supply strangely soothing. Either way, get comfortable. Maybe don't think too hard about where your water comes from. Here we go. Your eyes open. For half a second, just half a second, you don't know where you are. Then you do. You're lying on a straw pallet on the floor of a room that measures approximately 12 feet by 9 feet. You know the exact dimensions because you've paced them. The way people pace things when the walls feel close, when the ceiling feels like it's considering dropping, when you want to know precisely how much space you actually have. 12 feet by 9 feet, about the size of a large modern bathroom. In this room, there are currently 7 people. You, your cousin Bridget and her husband Declan, their 3 children, Siobhan, who is 8, Kieran, who is 6, and the baby, who everyone calls just the baby because they haven't fully committed to a name yet, which in 1854 is not negligence but a kind of practical superstition. Don't name them too early. Don't get attached too early. Wait and see. And then there's the lodger in the corner, the man who arrived 3 weeks ago with a shilling in his fist and slept in the corner without complaint. His name is Thomas. He's from somewhere in County Mayo, same as most of the neighbourhood. He smells of the tanning yard where he works, which is a smell you've learned to breathe through your mouth around. 7 people, 12 by 9. This is not unusual. 2 doors down, there are 11. The light coming through the single window. A window roughly the size of a large book, its glass thick and wavy and greenish, admitting more shadow than illumination, tells you it's early, not dawn early, pre-dawn early. The particular grey that comes before the grey that comes before the actual light. August 1854. You've been in London 8 months. Something woke you, and you're not sure what. You lie still and listen. Declan is snoring. Cheyenne has kicked off her blanket and is curled against the wall, one arm flung out. The baby makes the small underwater sounds it makes when it's between sleep and waking. The room smells of all the things it always smells of, plus the particular heaviness that accumulates when 7 people have been breathing in the same enclosed space for 8 hours. Then you hear it again. Thomas. He's not snoring. He's making a different sound, a sound that takes you a moment to classify. Wet. Rhythmic but broken. Like someone wringing out a cloth, except from the inside. Retching. You sit up. The straw pallet crinkles beneath you. Your back aches from the floor. It always aches from the floor. You've stopped registering it the way you've stopped registering the smell, but right now as you sit up, it announces itself specifically between your shoulder blades, a burning line of complaint. Thomas. Nothing. The retching continues. You pull yourself up, stepping carefully over Ciaran's sleeping legs, avoiding the loose board near the door that squeaks, and cross the room in the dark. 6 steps. You know where everything is. You have to know where everything is when you're navigating by memory, and not falling over children is a survival skill. Thomas is in the corner where he always is, but he's not lying down. He's on his knees, hunched over, arms wrapped around his own stomach like he's trying to hold himself together. Thomas, you all right? It's not a question, really. He's clearly not all right. He turns his head toward you, and even in the near dark you can see the sheen of sweat on his forehead. His face is the colour of old porridge. Stomach, he says. Just my stomach. How long? Hour. Maybe more. He retches again. There's nothing in it. He hasn't eaten since last night's bread and the bit of soup Bridget made, and apparently that's already gone. You crouch beside him and put your hand on his back, which is the only thing you can think to do. His shirt is soaking. The heat coming off him is alarming. Too much heat. Wrong amount heat. It'll pass, Thomas says. I'm grand. Go back to sleep. You want to believe him. You want very badly to believe him. Because here is the thing about London in August of 1854. The city has been here before. Twice, in fact. 1832, 1848. 2 waves of something that nobody can properly explain and nobody can properly stop. That sweeps through neighbourhoods like this one and empties them the way you'd empty a room of smoke. All at once from every corner, leaving nothing but the shell. Cholera. The word sits in the back of your head like a stone in a boot. You don't say it. Nobody in the neighbourhood says it, not really. Not when someone they know is bent over in a corner, sweating through their shirt at 4 a.m. You say stomach. You say something he ate. You say it'll pass. You say this because the alternative, saying the word, letting it land, feels like issuing an invitation. All right, you say. All right, I'll get you water. Getting water in this building is a project. This is important to understand. Water is not a thing that exists inside these walls. Not in any useful sense. There's no pipe coming in. No tap. No basin connected to anything. Water is something you go and get. The closest source is the pump on Broad Street, which is 2.5 minutes' walk from the front door of the building, assuming you don't have to queue. At 6 a.m, you usually don't have to queue. At 7, there will be 15 people waiting. At 8, 20. The pump serves this entire neighbourhood, an entire neighbourhood of 11,000 people per square mile, all fetching water, all day, every day, because that's the only way water exists in their lives. You know the route to the pump in the dark. You know it the way you know the 12 steps from your pallet to Thomas's corner, by repetition, by necessity. Left at the bottom of the stairs, through the narrow passage between the building and next door, out onto the court, left again, and then straight on, until you hit Broad Street. The building has 2 staircases, the main one and the back one. The main one is missing the 3rd step and has a wobble in the 7th that you've memorised the specific angle to compensate for. The back one is faster but narrower and smells worse, because that's where people bring their slop pails out, and the slop pails don't always make it the full distance before something goes wrong. You take the main staircase. In the passage you step over someone sleeping against the wall, a man you half recognise from the upper floor, whose name you don't know, who comes and goes at hours that suggest either very late shifts at a factory or something else. He's wrapped in a coat and his breath fogs in the relative cool of the passage. August in London is not the same thing as August anywhere warm. The heat sits in the streets during the day and then disappears at night, and the stones hold a kind of damp cold that gets into the walls of buildings like this one, which are too close together to dry out properly. Outside. The court is small. It was once a yard. Now it has the pump, a different pump from the one on Broad Street, older, less reliable, producing water that has a faint taste of old metal, and something else, something mineral and slightly off that everyone has commented on, and nobody has done anything about, because this is not the kind of neighbourhood where complaining produces results. The court also has the privy, which is a small structure against the back wall, which serves all 40 residents of this building and the 30-odd of the building next door. 70 people, 1 privy. You don't need the privy right now, but you note, as you always note, the state of the ground near it. In dry weather it's hard and cracked and stained. After rain it's something else entirely, something that soaks into the soles of shoes and comes with you back up the stairs and sits in the room with you until morning. The pump in the court has been producing less water lately. You noticed it last week. The handle requires more effort, produces less flow. The water that does come out has a different quality, harder to define than just taste, a heaviness to it, like it's working too hard to be water. You pump anyway. Fill the cracked pottery jug you brought down. It takes longer than it should. The handle resists with each downstroke, then gives suddenly, setting up a rhythm that's slightly wrong, slightly laboured. The water comes out cold, in August. That's strange, isn't it? You notice that too. The street pump on Broad Street, the good one, the popular one, the one everyone walks past the court pump to get to, its water comes out cold too, unusually cold. People comment on it approvingly. Cold water in summer from a pump. Must be deep, must be good. Cold is good. Cold means pure. Nobody has yet suggested that cold, in this context, might mean something else. Nobody has yet suggested that there are things invisible, smaller than anything visible, too small to be imagined, practically too small to exist, that thrive in contaminated water and can survive the cold better than anything you might use to kill them. It's 1854. Germ theory is 6 years away from Jon Snow and 13 years away from Pasteur making it undeniable. You know that illness comes from bad air, miasma they call it, the effluvia of rotten matter, the foul emanation of the poor neighbourhoods where the courts are cramped and the privies overflow, and the slaughterhouses and tanneries and bone-boiling yards sit among the houses like uninvited guests who have been there so long they feel like family. Bad air makes you sick. This is what you know. The air in this court smells bad enough to be killing people at a steady rate without any additional assistance. It smells of the privy and the walls and the accumulation of years of too many people in too little space. It smells of the tannery 3 streets over, and the boneyard on Peter Street, and the particular rotting sweetness of the Fleet Ditch, which runs underground but whose presence you can smell on certain days, when the wind is wrong and the temperature is high, and the city's buried history decides to remind you it's there. You pick up the jug, head back upstairs. 6 steps in the main passage, 2 left at the bottom of the stairs, compensate for the 7th step's wobble, navigate the landing. Thomas is still in the corner when you get back. He's sitting up now, which feels like an improvement. His arms are around his knees and he's shaking, which feels like less of one. You crouch beside him and offer the jug. He drinks. Long, grateful swallows. The water from the court pump cold and slightly metallic, going down a throat that's been emptied and wrung out by an hour of retching. Better, he says. Good. It'll pass, just stomach. Yeah, you say, just stomach. You go back to your pallet, lie down. Your back resumes its complaint between your shoulder blades. The room breathes its 7-person breath around you. Outside, somewhere in the court, a cat fights something in the dark. You close your eyes. You don't sleep. Dawn comes the way it always comes to Soho. Slowly, reluctantly, as if the light itself is uncertain whether to bother with these streets. By 6 you can see without the tallow candle. By past, the building is awake. You can hear it, the building coming alive around you, above you, below you. Footsteps on the stairs. A child crying 2 floors up. A door slamming. The particular creaking groan the main beam makes when the weight on the floor above shifts, which happens at roughly the same time every morning when the Flanagan family all get up at once. Bridget is up before you. She's always up before you. By the time you've unwound yourself from the floor and gotten your boots on, boots that have been resoled twice and whose leather is soft in places it shouldn't be soft, she's already got the fire going and a pot of water on for tea. Tea, one of the small dignities. Halfpenny a quarter ounce stretched to last the whole week, making something that is more the memory of tea than tea itself, faintly brown, vaguely warm, served in cups that don't all match, but tea. Bridget doesn't ask about Thomas. She looks at the corner where he's still sitting, still drawn in on himself, still sheened with sweat that hasn't dried. She looks at him the way women in this building look at things they're worried about and haven't yet decided what to do. Carefully, measuring, with a kind of practiced stillness that is the opposite of panic, but is not quite calm. "How long?" she says to you quietly without looking away from Thomas. "I heard him around 3 or 4. Might have been earlier." She sets a cup of the thin tea beside him. He looks at it like it might help, like he's hoping it might help. He picks it up with hands that are shaking slightly, wraps both palms around it. Declan comes in from the back. He's been down to the privy, and the expression on his face tells you the privy this morning is doing what the privy frequently does in summer, which is producing a smell so concentrated and specific that it clings to you even after you've left it and started breathing other air. "How's himself?" Declan says, nodding at Thomas. "Grand," Thomas says from the corner. Declan and you exchange a look that has no words in it, but says everything two men can say to each other about the situation without actually saying the word that neither of you is going to say. Siobhan appears from under her blanket and immediately demands porridge. Ciaran appears from under Siobhan's blanket. They sleep pressed together for warmth, always, in a way that is practical and tender, and will stop happening in a few years when they're old enough for it to feel wrong, but right now just looks like two children refusing to be cold. The baby makes its underwater sounds from the nest of old coats that serves as its sleeping arrangement. Breakfast is porridge. It's always porridge. Oats stretched with water, salted occasionally, on good weeks, with a small piece of bread and a scraping of dripping. It's 2 shillings a week for the room, and your wages are 8 shillings a week when the work is consistent and 6 when it isn't. And after the rent and the coal and the food, there's enough left for the occasional halfpenny on a newspaper or a penny on a song sheet and not much else. You eat standing because there aren't enough places to sit. You've been eating standing for 8 months, and it no longer feels like a comment on your circumstances. It just feels like breakfast. Through the window, which looks into a light well between this building and the next, a gap of maybe 3 feet, both walls close enough to touch from the sill, you can hear the building coming awake floor by floor. Upstairs, someone is having an argument about something. Through the wall on your left, a baby. Different baby from yours. The building has several babies, a small factory of babies, is crying in the particular way that means hungry rather than wet or scared. This is the sound of morning in a Soho tenement. The entire building breathing at once. You finish your porridge. Rinse your bowl with a splash of water from the jug you filled from the quart pump at 4 in the morning, the cold, slightly metallic water, the water that will get you through today. You'll need more before evening. You always need more. I'll stop by the Broad Street pump on my way, you say to Bridget. She nods, doesn't look up from the baby, which is feeding from a cloth soaked in thinned down porridge water, the baby sucking at it with focused determination. Take the big jug, she says, and the bucket if you can manage. You can manage. You always manage. That's what you do here. Outside, the court first. It's already active. Mrs. Connolly from the ground floor has beaten you to the pump and is filling a pot while simultaneously conducting a running monologue about the state of the privy, which has apparently reached new levels of difficulty overnight. She's a large woman from Connaught, who arrived in London in 1847 and has opinions about everything, delivered at volume to whoever is within range, regardless of whether they've indicated interest. And I said to him, that's not fit for Christian people. That's not fit for animals. That's not fit for anything with a nose. And he says to me, you exchange the pleasantry required, a nod, a morning Mrs. Connolly, a look of sympathetic attention, while you wait for the pump. The pump in the court this morning is worse than last night. The handle goes down with effort and comes back up sluggishly, and the water flow is a weak thread compared to even last week's output. The water looks slightly cloudy before it clears. You fill the smaller jug anyway, because you need it. That pump's going, says Mrs. Connolly, correctly assessing the situation with her characteristic economy. Mark my words, we'll be going to Broad Street for everything by the end of the week. She's not wrong. Out through the passage, out onto the court, left into Marshall Street, right onto Broadwick Street. No, wait, Marshall Street, then right onto Broad Street. Broad Street, Golden Square, in August of 1854, is a street in the specific way that only London streets are streets, which is to say it's not one thing but several things happening simultaneously in the same narrow space. On the left side, a vinegar works, producing a smell that would be oppressive on its own, but in context is almost refreshing, like a sharp note cutting through a fog. Next to it, a coal dealer, the ground black for 20 feet in every direction. Coal dust worked into the cobblestones and the walls and the skin of everyone who works there. Next to that, a pub that opens at 6 and is already doing business, the door propped open, the sour, sweet smell of beer mixed with the morning air. On the right, houses, terraced, cramped, looking much like the building you just left except slightly better maintained, which puts them one tier above yours on the hierarchy of this neighbourhood, which has many tiers, and in the middle, the street itself. Cobblestones, yes, but not the kind you imagine when someone says cobblestones, not neat, uniform, pleasantly historical cobblestones. These are old and uneven, worn smooth in the centre by decades of cartwheels, cracked and tilted at the edges where they've settled into the earth beneath. The gaps between them are filled with compacted mud and horse dung, and things you don't examine closely. The centre of the street, where the drainage channel runs, has a smell in summer that you've learned to simply not think about. Horse traffic has already started. A dray cart, massive and slow, loaded with barrels, the two enormous horses pulling it with the patient indifference of animals who have done this particular stretch of road so many times it requires no conscious thought. A costermonger with a barrow of cabbages, shouting something repetitive and hypnotic. Two women walking quickly, bonnets down, on their way somewhere with purpose. And there, the pump. The Broad Street pump sits on the north side of the street, near the corner where it meets Cambridge Street. It's a simple iron structure, a stand post with a curved handle, the kind you work up and down, a trough at the base for collecting spillage. Around it, always, a gathering of people, residents with jugs and pots and buckets, doing what you're doing, which is acquiring the most fundamental thing you need to continue existing. There's a queue this morning, not a long one, 6 people ahead of you, but a queue. You join it. This is its own kind of time. Queue time. The specific texture of standing in a line in an 1854 London street waiting for water, which is nothing and everything simultaneously. You observe. This is what you do when you have to stand still. You watch. The woman ahead of you has a bucket in each hand and a baby on her back secured with a shawl. She's managing all 3 with an efficiency that suggests she's done this so many times. Her body has developed separate routines for each, running simultaneously without interference. An older man, 3 people ahead, fills a large clay pot slowly and carefully, watching the water level with the attention of someone for whom this vessel represents a significant portion of the morning's water supply, and who cannot afford to lose any of it on the walk back. 2 boys, maybe 11, 12, are filling a smaller container with the specific speed of people who have other places to be. They're talking while they pump, a rapid overlapping conversation about something. You catch yesterday, and he said, and I never, without breaking the rhythm of pumping. The pump itself makes a sound as it works, a hollow sucking draw on the downstroke, a rush and splash as the water comes through. Steadier than the court pump, stronger. You can feel the difference even standing here waiting. This pump has water behind it, the real weight of an underground source, Something below the street that doesn't seem to run out or go sour. Cold water, good water. The woman with the 2 buckets finishes, maneuvers the full buckets with impressive precision, and moves away. You step forward. Your turn. You work the handle. Down, up, down, up. The water comes smoothly, fills the big jug in maybe 30 seconds. Cold, clear, faintly sweet in a way you've noticed but never analysed. You fill the bucket. It takes longer. Your arms ache slightly by the end. The handle requires real effort, each downstroke working against the spring mechanism. Your palms, already rough from the work you do during the week, register the cold iron of the handle as both familiar and slightly abrasive. The calluses have stopped being painful and started being simply texture, the permanent topography of hands that work. The bucket full, the jug full, you lift both and start back. This is the particular discipline of carrying water in a city where water doesn't come to you. The bucket has to be held slightly away from your body to avoid the water sloshing over the rim onto your trouser leg, which is a thing you learned by getting your trouser leg wet and then learning to avoid it. The jug goes in your other hand, balanced, tilted at the angle that keeps the surface still. You've gotten good at this. You can move at nearly a normal pace now without losing more than a small amount. All around you, people are doing the same thing. Coming to the pump, going from the pump. A steady human traffic in and out of Broad Street. All day. Every day. The neighbourhood feeding itself from this single point. This is what a water supply looks like when it's been outsourced to a pump on a street corner. When there are no pipes. When the infrastructure of basic life has to be manually recreated every single day by human effort, jug by jug, bucket by bucket. You're halfway back to the building when you see the first one. He's a man you don't know well. You've seen him on the stairs, in the court, a printer's compositor, you think, or something in that line. Young, maybe 25. He's coming down Marshall Street toward you, and the way he's moving is wrong. Not injured wrong. Not drunk wrong, though you know what the look's like. This is a different kind of wrong. He's walking with his arms close to his body and his shoulders slightly raised. The posture of someone who is concentrating hard on the basic mechanics of locomotion. His face is pale in a specific way. White around the mouth, grey at the temples, the colour of skin that's lost something it needs. He's moving fast with the focused urgency of someone who needs to get somewhere immediately and does not have much time. He passes you without acknowledgement. You turn to watch him. He goes straight through the passage into the court, the privy. You turn back and keep walking. The water in the bucket barely moved. You've gotten that good. Thomas is worse by midday. Not catastrophically worse. Not in the way that means you need to do something immediately, or at least not in the way that's obvious. But he's on the floor instead of in the corner, which seems significant. Bridget has put a blanket over him. The tea is cold and untouched beside him. He's still awake. That's something. Been sick again? You ask. Twice. He says it flat. And the other end. Which is the other thing? Cholera. Not that anyone is saying the word, not that anyone is using it. Cholera is not just one end. It's both. Simultaneously, relentlessly. Your body, which is mostly water, decides to evacuate all the water it has in whatever direction it can manage, with no particular discrimination. People don't die from the illness itself exactly. They die from thirst. Their own body empties itself of every drop of fluid until there's nothing left. In 1854, nobody knows this. Nobody fully understands what's happening when it happens. They just know what it looks like. I'll get more water, you say. Bridget shakes her head slightly. Not at you. At something internal. Some calculation she's running. The court pumps almost nothing. Broad Street, then. He needs to keep it down. I know. This is the particular cruelty of what you don't yet know is happening. The treatment, the only treatment that might actually help, that is drinking water, constantly replacing what the body loses, is being delivered from the same source as the problem. You bring Thomas water from the Broad Street pump, cold and apparently good, clear and sweet, and he drinks it because he's desperately thirsty, and the water helps briefly because his body needs fluid, and then it makes everything worse because the thing in the water, the thing nobody can see, the thing nobody has a name for yet, the thing that is Vibrio cholerae, living in an aquifer that has been contaminated by something in the ground, beneath a particular house, in a particular pit, in this particular neighbourhood, goes straight back in and starts the cycle again. But you don't know this. Nobody in this building knows this. You pick up the bucket and go back to Broad Street. The queue at the pump is longer now. Midday brings the people who couldn't come in the morning, those who work early shifts, women who had children to feed and fires to start before they could think about water. 12 people ahead of you. Maybe 14. You wait. The summer sun is on the street now, and the cobblestones are giving back the heat they've accumulated, and the smell of the street is moving into its afternoon mode, which is more active, more present, more like a physical force than the morning version. A horse has deposited what horses deposit, directly in the centre of the street, and nobody has cleaned it up yet. The flies are working on it efficiently. The man next to you in the queue notices your expression and shrugs. Summer, he says by way of complete explanation. Summer, you agree. He's a middle-aged man with a broadcloth coat that's been mended so many times, the mending is now more coat than original fabric. Carpenter, you'd guess from the hands. Wide, flat-fingered, with the specific wear pattern of sawing and hammering. He's got a large pot with him, the kind used for cooking, which tells you he's here for household water, not just drinking. Your lot in the tall building, he asks. Second floor, he nods. My cousin's on the third, says your court pump's barely going. Barely, you confirm. They should fix it. Council should. Fat chance. The council, the Metropolitan Board of Works, newly formed, theoretically responsible for the infrastructure of this city, practically responsible for the ongoing argument about who pays for what, while the city's sewers run into the same Thames that the water companies draw from, in a system of perfect and catastrophic circularity. Nobody fixes it, not quickly, not in neighbourhoods like this one. You inch forward in the queue. 2 places ahead of you, a woman is talking to the man next to her in a low, urgent voice. You catch fragments. 3 this morning, Mrs. Tavistock's daughter, and they took her to the hospital, and the Rileys too, I heard. Though you know how that family... You stop listening, or you try to stop listening. Mrs. Tavistock's daughter. That's the family on the 4th floor. The older woman with the large family and the specific laugh you can hear through 2 floors and a ceiling. Her daughter is, 18, 19? You've seen her on the stairs on the way to the pump in the court, 3 this morning. By the time you get back to the room, Declan is there, which is unusual because Declan works days at a furniture-making workshop in Carnaby Street and doesn't usually come back until evening. His expression, when you come through the door, tells you something has changed while you are gone. Thomas is sleeping now, or not sleeping. The difference between what Thomas is doing and actual sleep is visible in the tension in his jaw, the way his hands are clasped too tight. Bridget is at the window, which she's opened as much as it opens, which is about 4 inches before the swollen wood stops it. She's looking at the light well between buildings. "Declan," you say. "There's 3 down on our floor alone," Declan says. He keeps his voice level. Declan keeps everything level, which is either a character trait or something he's decided. You're never sure. "And Mrs. O'Halloran from the floor above, and someone in the building next door this morning I heard on the way out." He says the word then, quietly, almost under his breath. "Cholera!" It lands in the room like something dropped on a stone floor. Everyone hears it. Nobody responds immediately. Then Bridget says, still looking at the light well, "I know." And Chiffon, from the corner where she's been sitting with Kieran, playing some game with 2 buttons and a length of string, says, in the careful, neutral voice of a child who's been listening to adults for years, "Are we going to get it?" Nobody answers her immediately, which is an answer. You set the bucket down. The water sloshes slightly, cold and clear from the Broad Street pump, enough for the afternoon. You spend the afternoon doing the only thing there is to do, which is staying close and watching. This is what illness looks like when there is no hospital bed available, no doctor coming, no institution whose job it is to show up and take the problem away from you. You stay, you watch, you bring water when you can, and you keep the fire going, and you try to make the room feel like something other than what it is, which is a 12 by 9 foot space that has started to smell like the inside of a sick man's body. And you do all of this not because you know what you're doing, but because the alternative is leaving, and leaving is not something you do. Thomas keeps the water down for maybe 20 minutes at a time before his body decides it has other plans. The crockery bowl you're using is not large enough. You make 4 trips to the court and 2 to the hall to empty it. Each trip is an education. On the first trip down the stairs, you pass the Monahans from the floor above. Mrs. Monahan is sitting on the stairs, which nobody does. The stairs are a transit corridor, not a place you sit. And her husband is crouched beside her, talking in a low voice. And when you make to go around them, she looks up and her face stops you for a moment. She's not panicking. That's what's strange. There's something past panic in her expression, something flat and purposeful, the look of someone who has already processed the worst possible news and come out the other side into the place where you simply deal with things. Her husband, Padraig, looks up at you with the eyes that are asking a question he doesn't put into words. "Thomas," you say. "On and off since 3 this morning." Padraig nods. "Brendan, since midnight." Their eldest. You know him slightly. A big, loud young man who works at the knacker's yard and comes home smelling of it, and fills the staircase with his presence. "We've got a bit of chamomile," Mrs. Monaghan says. "Brought it from home. I don't know if it does anything, but it's what my mother gave us." "Thank you," you say. "I'll be back up for it." You continue down. In the passage at the bottom of the stairs, 2 women from the ground floor are talking with the compressed intensity of people sharing information they don't want to share out loud. You catch the words Tavistock and hospital and they took her. You catch already and the boy from the tannery, and a name you don't recognise, followed by a pause that means what pauses mean in this kind of conversation. You go out to the court, empty the bowl. The privy door is closed. Someone is in there and has been for a while, to judge from the quality of the silence from that direction. Not the impatient silence of waiting, something else. You go back upstairs. By 3 in the afternoon the building has changed. Not structurally. The beams still hold. The ceiling still exists above the plaster that's coming away in sheets above the third-floor landing. The windows with their thick wavy glass still admit their particular greenish light. But it's different now in a way you feel before you understand it. The noise level has changed. Not quieter exactly. There's more noise than usual in some ways, more movement, more doors opening and closing, more feet on the stairs. But the quality of the noise has shifted. The ordinary sounds of a building full of people living their lives, cooking sounds, child sounds, argument sounds, the rhythmic thumping of someone doing laundry, those are less. In their place, voices at a different frequency. Lower. More urgent. You go up to the third floor for the chamomile from Mrs. Monaghan, and you see the O'Halloran door open, which it never is. The room inside is visible from the corridor, and you don't mean to look, but you do. Mrs. O'Halloran, the wide woman with the laugh you can hear from 2 floors down, is on her bed, which isn't a bed exactly, but a mattress on boards, which is what passes for a bed in most rooms in this building. She's on her side, knees pulled up, and her daughter is beside her doing the same things you've been doing for Thomas. Water, bowl, blanket. The rhythm of it. Mrs. O'Halloran is grey, not pale. Grey. The specific colourlessness of someone whose body is liquidating itself from the inside. Her daughter looks up and sees you in the doorway. She doesn't say anything. You don't say anything. What is there to say? You get the chamomile from Mrs. Monaghan, who presses a small paper twist of it into your hand with the gravity of someone bestowing something genuinely valuable, which in this context it is, and you go back downstairs. Thomas keeps the chamomile tea down for 30 minutes. That's the longest he's kept anything down. Bridget says nothing, but you see her shoulders drop slightly when he manages it. Some tension going out of her that had been there since the morning. The baby has been fed and is sleeping on the pile of coats. Chauvin and Sierra are on the floor near the window, close together, not playing anymore. Just being near each other in the specific way children are near each other when they've absorbed the atmosphere of the room without being told anything directly. Declan comes back in from somewhere. He'd been up and down, talking to people, gathering information with the steady industriousness of a man who feels better knowing the shape of things even when the shape is bad. 11 on this street that I know of, he says. He closes the door behind him and leans against the wall and says it quietly, the way you'd say a number that doesn't make sense yet, that you're still working out the implications of. On our street, and the ones down Marshall Street, and I heard 3 families on Silver Street. You do a rough calculation. 11 on Broad Street alone, in roughly 6 hours. And they're all same, Declan says. All same. Same symptoms. Starting in the night or early morning. The stomach. Both ends. The sweating. It's the air, says Bridget without inflection. Not a theory. Just the existing explanation. The only one available. The miasma from the slaughterhouses, the boneyards, the overcrowded privies, the court pumps that no longer work properly, the general atmospheric weight of too many people living too close together. Bad air. The punishment of poverty. Maybe, Declan says. He doesn't sound convinced. He sounds like a man who has looked at a pattern and noticed that the pattern has a shape. Everyone on this street uses the Broad Street pump, he says. Everyone uses the Broad Street pump, you confirm. Mrs. Connolly was saying the court pump is nearly done. Declan is quiet for a moment. The Atkinsons, he says. The family near the Vinegar Works. Protestant family. They've got their own, well, small one in the yard. Doesn't connect to anything. I walked past their house twice today. No sign of anything. Children out playing. Nobody in the room says anything immediately. You think about the pump, the cold water, the sweetness of it. Could be coincidence, you say, because someone has to say the thing that maintains normalcy for another 5 minutes. Could be, Declan says. Yeah. He pushes off from the wall and picks up his jacket. I'm going to talk to the publican at the Watford Arms. He'll know who else is down. The door closes. Bridget looks at you. You look at Bridget. Thomas makes a sound from the corner. You pick up the bowl. At 4:30 you go out again. Not for water this time, or not only for water. You take the jug, because you always take the jug, but also because the room has reached the point where the smell and the closeness of it have built to a pressure you can't sustain without a break. This is something they don't tell you about caring for the sick in cramped spaces. The moments when you need 10 minutes of different air, not because you're giving up, but because if you don't get them, you'll be no use to anyone. Outside, Broad Street is different from the morning. The midday traffic has thinned, not cleared. There are still people, still carts, still the constant London motion that never entirely stops. But there's a gap in it, a texture missing. The costermonger with his cabbages is gone. The pub on the left has its door closed, which it never does in summer. A small group of men stands at the corner of Cambridge Street, talking with the kind of stillness that replaces movement when there's nothing to do about something. 3 women are at the pump, but they're not pumping. They're standing near it, and one of them is pointing at something, and as you get closer you hear the conversation. Mrs. Riley told me herself. She said he was fine yesterday. And then by midnight. And the Lewises too, both children. They took the older one to the Middlesex this morning. I've been getting water here every day for 4 years, and I'm telling you, something's wrong. The third woman is the one pointing. She's pointing at the pump itself, the innocent iron stand post with its curved handle. She's a small, sharp-faced woman you don't know. Not from your building. Probably from one of the houses further up. It's the water, she says. Mary, you can't know that. I know it, I'm telling you. My husband says the same. Don't use the pump. She looks around as if the pump itself might take offence. Go to the one on Carnaby Street. Or fetch from the New River Company if you can. Not this one. Not today. The other women look at each other. You stand there with your jug and you feel the particular vertigo of being inside a moment that might be important. Might be one of those moments that you'll look back on later and understand. But that in the present just feels like a worried woman and a pump and a smell in the air. That is the smell it always is. You pump your water. The pump works smoothly. The water comes cold and clear. You carry it home. He comes late in the afternoon. You're on the stairs when you see him, coming up the street toward the pump with a notebook in his hand and a look of focused attention that is different from the looks of everyone else on the street, which are looks of worry or hurry or the flat practical determination of people who have somewhere to be. This look is interested. Specifically, carefully, analytically interested. He's a compact man, middle-aged, wearing a good dark coat slightly too warm for August, carrying the notebook in one hand and a small leather bag in the other. He walks at the speed of someone who is deliberately not rushing, who is making himself take in what he's seeing rather than simply crossing it. He stops at the pump, doesn't use it, looks at it, then looks around him, up the street, down the street, at the buildings, at the people. He writes something in the notebook. You watch him from the stairs, not sure why you're watching. He turns and sees you watching. doesn't seem surprised by it. He has the manner of someone accustomed to being looked at slightly sideways, which in this neighbourhood means someone who is clearly from somewhere else socially, whose clothes are better, and whose hands are softer, and whose presence requires some explanation. "You live here?" he asks. Not unfriendly, businesslike but not cold. "Second floor, you say, the tall building." He nods and writes something. "How long?" 8 months, since January. "And you use this pump?" "Broad Street." Everyone on this street uses Broad Street. He writes this down. His handwriting from the distance of the stairs is small and precise, the writing of a man who has been writing things down for a long time and has made it efficient. "Have you been ill?" he asks. "No." "Anyone in your household?" You think of Thomas in the corner, the grey colour of Mrs. O'Halloran, the Monahans on the stairs. "My lodger," you say. "Since the early hours." "Since when exactly?" "I heard him around 3. He might have started before I woke." More writing. "Do you know others? In your building or near here?" You give him what Declan gave you, the rough count, the names you know, what you heard on the stairs. He writes all of it without expression, without the flinching that the numbers deserve. You get the impression he's heard numbers like these before. That the numbers don't surprise him, but that they confirm something. "Who are you?" you ask, not impolitely. "You're Irish and 23, and you have been in London long enough to lose most of the reflexive deference you arrived with, which was not much to begin with." He looks up from the notebook. Something in his expression shifts. Not the focused, analytic look, but something slightly different. The look of a man who is used to this question and who answers it differently depending on the circumstances. "Jon Snow," he says. "I'm a physician. You know the name." Or, not exactly know it, but there's something in the name that connects to something. A conversation somewhere in the past few months. Something about... You can't quite place it. You're not here as a physician, you say, because a physician who came to treat the sick would be inside a building right now, not standing at a pump with a notebook. He gives you a look that contains something like respect. "No," he says, "I'm here because I think the water is doing this." He tells you what he can in the time he has, which is not long. He has doors to knock on, people to talk to, a map he's building in his head and on paper, a theory he needs to test against the weight of evidence before it becomes anything more than a theory. But he tells you enough. "Not miasma," he says. Or, not only. He's careful about this, precise about what he does and doesn't know. Not just the bad air, not just the accumulated exhalation of poverty and overcrowding. Something in the water. He's been thinking about this for years, working through the logic of it. Why cholera spreads the way it spreads. Why it follows patterns that don't match the patterns of bad air. Why it takes whole households but leaves others untouched. Why it travels routes that correspond not to prevailing winds, but to water supplies. He's mapped the last outbreak. He's working on mapping this one. The pump, he thinks. This pump. Something has gotten into the well that this pump draws from. Something that shouldn't be there. And everyone who uses this pump, he stops himself. "I don't know yet," he says. "I think it. I don't know it. There's a difference." You stand on the steps, and you look at the pump, and you think about the bucket you brought up at midday, the bucket that's sitting in the room right now, that Thomas has been drinking from. "What do I do?" you say. He looks at you directly. "Stop using this pump," he says. "Tell everyone you know to stop." boil the water you have before you use it. It won't remove everything, I don't think, but it helps. And he pauses, and you can see him choosing between the full truth and the version of it that's useful right now. Keep the sick person hydrated. I know that seems wrong given what the water might be, but dehydration will kill faster than anything else. He closes the notebook, opens it again, writes something, tears it out, holds it out to you. This is the address of a pump on Carnaby Street. It draws from a different source. I've checked it. You take the paper. It's small, folded twice. Thank you, you say. He nods, already turning back toward the street, toward the next door, the next conversation, the map he's building. You watch him go. He walks down Broad Street with the deliberate pace of someone who is doing the thing that most needs to be done, and he stops at the next building and knocks, notebook ready, and you see the door open and a face appear, and he begins again. You stand on the steps for another minute. The pump is right there, 20 feet away. People are still using it. A woman with a jug you've seen in the queue, every morning for 8 months, nodding to each other, the routine of it, the pump as constant and reliable as the church bells, the pump as simply part of what Broad Street is. You think about what the doctor said. You think about how a thing can look clean, how cold water looks like good water, how you can be drinking from a well that has something wrong in it and never know, because it looks right, smells right, tastes right, how there's a whole world happening in the water that no one can see yet, that no one has the tools to see yet. That won't become visible for another decade when the microscopes and the methods catch up with the suspicion. How wrong a thing can be while looking completely normal. You go back inside. You don't use the Broad Street pump again. This is harder than it sounds. The Carnaby Street pump is 8 minutes away, 12 with a full bucket. In a day where you need water for cooking, for drinking, for Thomas, for the baby, for the basic sanitation of a room where someone is sick, 8 minutes there and 8 minutes back is a significant fraction of available time and a significant expenditure of available energy. But you don't use the Broad Street pump. You tell Bridget. She listens without expression, which is her way of processing information that is serious enough to require her full attention. Then she nods once. "I'll tell Mrs. Connolly," she says. "Tell everyone. I'll tell everyone I can." You take the big bucket and you go to Carnaby Street. The Carnaby Street pump is different. Less busy, which makes sense. It's not the neighbourhood's primary pump, just a secondary one, further from the most densely populated streets. It doesn't have the queue of the Broad Street pump. It doesn't have the smooth efficiency of a well-used mechanism. The handle is slightly stiffer, the flow slightly slower. But the water is water, cold, clear, not sweet in the particular way the Broad Street water is sweet. You fill the bucket, you fill the jug, you carry them back. On the way, you pass 3 people going to Broad Street with their own containers, and you stop each of them and tell them what you know, which is, "I spoke to a physician. He thinks the pump is what's doing this. Don't use Broad Street, go to Carnaby Street." The first person, a man, looks sceptical and keeps walking. The second person, a woman with 2 children, stops. She listens. She looks at your face while you talk, and she's reading something in it, some level of seriousness that either convinces her or doesn't. "Just don't," you say, "just this week. Use Carnaby Street." She turns around, takes her children back the way she came. The third person already knows. She heard from her neighbour, who heard from Declan, who's been conducting his own information campaign all afternoon. She nods at you and shows you the jug in her hand, already headed the right direction. Something is travelling through the neighbourhood. Not just the disease, something else. Word. The transmission of information through a community that has no newspaper, no official announcement, no mechanism for public health warnings except people talking to each other on stairs and at pumps and through walls. The original social network, slow and imperfect and the only thing available. You go home, evening in the building. The specific quality of light that comes when the sun goes below the roofline and the rooms are lit by fire and tallow candle. The shift from the day's sounds to the evening sounds. The smell of cooking from every floor, overlapping. Whoever has something to cook is cooking it. Cabbage and potato and the occasional blessed smell of meat, salt and fat and fire. But tonight the cooking smells are fewer. On your floor only Bridget's pot. Thomas can't eat. The smell of the food makes him worse. You take your bowl of the thin vegetable soup outside to the landing to eat it, standing, listening to the building around you. From upstairs. Nothing from the O'Hallorans' room. No sound at all, which is more alarming than sound would be. From the floor above that, low voices. A man's voice, steady and rhythmic, which you identify after a moment as prayer. The rosary, counting out its decades in the dark, the words worn smooth by repetition into something more like texture than language. From the room next to yours, through the wall, the sound of someone retching, faint but unmistakable. The Kellys. You didn't know it had reached the Kellys. Below you, the ground floor has 3 families, and from the passage on your way up you registered 2 things. A smell that has gotten worse. The particular smell of a room where someone is very ill, which is different from the ordinary smell of poverty and crowding. More chemical, more body. And a sound of weeping, quiet and sustained, coming from behind a closed door. The weeping is not the weeping of pain. You've known what that sounds like. This is the other kind. The after pain kind. The when it's over kind. You eat your soup. Through the window at the end of the landing, a window that looks onto the court, you can see the pump. The court pump, the one that's been failing all week. It stands in the darkening yard, motionless, unused. No one is going to it tonight. Out on Broad Street, which you can just see if you lean at the right angle, there's a man with a lantern walking slowly, stopping at houses, knocking, the long, slow business of someone taking inventory, going door to door, asking questions. The doctor, or someone like him. You watch him for a moment. Then you go back inside. Thomas makes it through the night. This is not given. You understand this more clearly now than you did that morning, more clearly with each hour that passes and each trip you make with the bowl, and each time you bring him water from the jug you refilled at Carnaby Street, boiled now, cooled, the best you can do. He keeps less than half of what he drinks, but he keeps some. By 9 in the evening he's sleeping, real sleep this time or something closer to it, and his breathing has settled into a pattern that sounds more like sleep than like effort. His face is still wrong, still grey and sunken in the specific way that frightens you, but the shaking has lessened. Bridget sits by him for an hour. You take the children to the corner. They've been too quiet all day. The quietness of children who have correctly assessed the situation and made themselves small so as not to add to it. And you tell them a story. Not a good story. Not one with a shape. You're not in the shape of story's frame of mind. You just talk about home, about the village in Roscommon, about the river and the fields and the way the light falls different there in the evening. Different from London light, longer and softer, the kind of light that makes the ordinary landscape look like something more than it is. Xuan falls asleep in the middle of it, her head against your arm. Xiran stays awake a little longer. He's been watching you all day the way children watch adults when they're trying to understand something no one will explain directly. "Is Thomas going to die?" he asks. Quiet, matter of fact, the question that's been in the room all day. "I don't think so," you say. "How do you know?" "I don't know. I think he won't." Kieran considers this, apparently decides it's sufficient. "Okay," he says, and closes his eyes. You sit with them against the wall while the candle burns down. Outside, London passes through its night sounds, the taverns, the distant church bells, the occasional shout, the cartwheels on cobblestones, the sounds that usually feel like the city's heartbeat, the reassuring rhythm of a place that's still alive, still functioning. Tonight they feel different, less reassuring, more like the sounds of something continuing that should perhaps, under the circumstances, be pausing. The city doesn't pause. The city never pauses. You blow out the candle when it gets too short, and you sit in the dark with 2 sleeping children against your side, and you listen to Thomas breathing. Declan comes back late. He's been all over the neighbourhood. Knacker's Yard district, the courts off Silver Street, the streets between Golden Square and Carnaby. He sits down on the floor across from you with the slow, deliberate movement of a man who is very tired and very carefully holding something together. 50, he says. You wait. 50 that I can get a number for. That I know of, since this morning. The room is quiet. Thomas breathes. The baby shifts in its nest of coats. Some of them are already... Declan stops, starts again. They took Mrs. O'Halloran this afternoon to the hospital. I don't know. He stops again. Mrs. O'Halloran with the laugh. Mrs. O'Halloran, whose laugh you've been hearing through the ceiling since you arrived in January, a reliable constant, part of the building's texture. The doctor, you say. The one I told you about. Snow. He was on the street this afternoon. He's got a list, names and addresses. He thinks the pump. I know, Declan says. He knocked on 6 doors that I saw, after you talked to him. You talked to him? Briefly. He wanted to know about the Atkinsons. The Protestant family with their own well. I told him what you told me. And? Declan pulls at his collar, a gesture of fatigue or frustration, it's hard to tell. He wrote it down. Everything. He's building something. A map, he said, where everyone who's sick lives, where everyone who's not sick lives. He thinks the pattern will show the pump. Will it? I don't know. Maybe. He looks at his hands. The water I've been fetching for 3 days. The water I've been giving the kids. It all came from Broad Street. He says it flat. The specific flatness of someone who has already processed the worst part of a realization and is now on the other side of it, in the place where you deal with what you know instead of what you fear. They're not sick, you say. The children. They're fine. Tonight they're fine. Brigid. You. Me. Tonight. Then we deal with tonight. He looks at you. Something passes between you that is in the same register as the look you exchanged that morning about Thomas, but larger. This is not 2 men deciding whether to be worried about a lodger. This is 2 men who came from the same village, came on the same boat, ended up in the same 12 by 9 foot room in London, deciding something about what to do with what they know. Carnaby Street from now, you say. For everything. Boil it before you use it. Declan nods. And we tell everyone we can, you say. We've been doing that. We keep doing it. He nods again, looks at Thomas. He looks worse than this morning, he says. He's sleeping. That's worse. He kept some water down an hour ago. Declan is quiet, processing this. All right, he says. All right. He lies down on his pallet without undressing. You hear him breathe in, breathe out, the deliberate rhythm of a man making himself slow down. Outside, somewhere on the street, someone is crying. Not quietly. The full-throated night crying of genuine grief, unconstrained, going up into the dark air above Broad Street and spreading out. It goes on for a while, then it stops. London keeps going, indifferent and necessary, the way cities always keep going. You don't sleep for most of that night. You sit by Thomas because someone should, and because Bridget has finally fallen asleep with the baby on her chest, and Siobhan pressed against her side, and Declan is out within 10 minutes of lying down, the total sleep of physical exhaustion, and there's no reason for everyone to be awake. The night has a quality to it that is different from ordinary nights. You've spent 7 months learning the particular sounds and rhythms of this building at night, and tonight those rhythms are off. There are people moving who don't usually move at night. There are sounds from rooms that are usually silent. The stairs creak at intervals that don't match the usual patterns. The building is awake in the fearful, uncertain way of a place where something is happening that nobody fully understands. Toward midnight, you hear footsteps on the stairs, slow, deliberate. Someone carrying something, taking care. You go to the door. It's Mr. Hannigan from the floor above carrying his wife. She's conscious, just. Her arms are around his neck and her head is against his shoulder, and she's making small sounds, rhythmic, that are either pain or the effort of staying present. He's a small man, wiry, the kind of smallness that comes with a specific density of muscle, and he's carrying her without apparent effort, except that his face is doing something complicated. "Hospital," he says. "I'm taking her to the hospital." The Middlesex is 20 minutes. I know. I'll come with you. He looks at you, looks at the room behind you, the open door, Thomas on the floor, the sleeping family. "I'm all right," he says. "You can't carry her 20 minutes on your own." A pause. "Let me get my coat," you say. Outside, Broad Street at midnight. The street is not empty. London streets at midnight are never truly empty. There are always the night people, the workers, the ones who operate in the gap between the last tavern closing and the first market opening. But the specific population of Broad Street tonight is different. There are lights in windows that should be dark, candles moving behind glass, the orange flicker of someone awake who shouldn't be awake. There's a cart stopped outside a house 4 doors down. A man is loading something onto it, something wrapped in canvas, and you don't look at what it is because you don't need to, and because once you know you cannot unknow, and there's no use in knowing right now. The pump stands at the corner, motionless, waiting. You and Mr. Hannigan walk down the street with his wife between you. One arm over each, shoulder, her feet dragging slightly, her weight distributed. She's cold in the way sick people get cold, the sweat having left her and nothing replacing it. You can feel the bones of her shoulder under your hand through the thin wool. "How long?" you ask quietly. "She was fine yesterday," Hannigan says. He says it with the specific bewilderment of a man for whom the speed is the unbelievable part. "Yesterday she was hanging the laundry." The speed is the thing. That's the thing about cholera. Though you won't have a name for it until later, won't have a proper understanding until years hence. The speed of it. Fine in the morning, dying by evening, alive at midnight, gone by dawn. The body's interior architecture, which you've spent your whole life trusting to operate quietly in the background, suddenly and without warning deciding to work against you with everything it has. Yesterday she was hanging the laundry. You walk faster. The Middlesex Hospital is on Mortimer Street, north of Oxford Street, which is north of Broad Street. 20 minutes in good condition, steady pace. Tonight, with 3 of you, it takes longer. You go up Marshall Street, across Regent Street, up into the wider streets north of Oxford Street, where the buildings are better and the air is marginally, barely, but genuinely just as different. The hospital takes her. The admission is quick and procedural. A brief exchange with the nurse who has the manner of someone who has processed many people tonight and will process many more before morning. She takes his wife's name, his name, their address. She asks about when it started. She asks about the water. Broad Street Pump, Hannigan says. The nurse writes it down. She says something to a colleague that you don't catch. You wait with Hannigan in the entrance while they take her through. He stands with his hands at his sides, arms slightly away from his body, in the posture of someone who has put down a weight and doesn't know what to do with their arms now that it's gone. He looks very small in the hospital corridor. Go home, you tell him. Sleep. Come back in the morning. I should stay? You can't help her by standing in a corridor. He knows this. He nods. You walk back together. The city around you is doing its midnight things. A pair of night watchmen passing. A flash carriage. Expensive. Anonymous. Someone inside going somewhere that doesn't concern you. Stray dogs. The pale London kind. Thin and territorial and surprisingly decisive about which streets they own. Broad Street again. The Pump again. Hannigan looks at it as you pass. He looks at it for a long moment. You think it, he says. The doctor does. Do you? You think of the cold water, the sweet taste, the way it looked perfectly normal in the bucket, in the jug, in the cup you held out to Thomas at 4 a.m. Yeah, you say. I think it. Hannigan nods once. Goes up the stairs without another word. You go back to your room. Thomas is still breathing. You sit down beside him and pull your knees up and put your back against the wall, and you wait for the morning. Morning of the second day comes in through the wavy green glass like something apologising for itself. You've been awake for most of the night. Not all of it. There was an hour somewhere between 2 and 3 when you drifted into the grey territory between sleep and consciousness. Your back against the wall, your chin dropping, the room swimming slightly. Not real sleep. The body's minimum, the thing it takes when it cannot have what it needs. Your neck is wrong when you fully come back to yourself. A knot below the right ear, running down into the shoulder, the specific consequence of sleeping, sitting up against plaster that doesn't give. You roll your head. The knot announces itself with sharp clarity. You press 2 fingers against it and breathe. Thomas is still alive. This is the first thing you check, the first thing every morning will start with for the next several days. Is he still alive? And each time the answer is yes, it's yes with the particular quality of something that hasn't been guaranteed, something still in negotiation. He's on his side now. He moved during the night, sometime when you were in your grey space, rolled from his back to his side and drawn his knees up. His breathing is audible, but not laboured. Shallow, maybe, but steady. The blanket has stayed on him. which feels significant in a way you can't entirely justify. The grey colour is still there, but something in his face has settled from its nighttime tension into something that at least resembles rest. You let yourself breathe. Bridget is already up. She moves in the pre-dawn dark with the quiet efficiency of someone who's been doing this, managing a household, managing children, managing the logistics of survival in a small space, for long enough that her body does it without requiring her full attention. She gets the fire going. She puts the pot on. The baby is awake and has been fed without you hearing it happen. She looks at Thomas, looks at you. Better, you say quietly. She nods, turns back to the pot. This is not a family that celebrates small victories out loud. You've noticed this. Relief goes inward, gets processed, gets filed. You move on. There's always something next. You go out at first light. Not for water. You have enough from last night's Carnaby Street run. Still in the bucket. Cool now. Waiting. You go out because after a night in that room you need the particular medicine of movement and outside air, and because you want to see what Broad Street looks like in the morning of its second day. It looks quiet. This is the most alarming thing about it. Broad Street in the morning is never quiet. Broad Street in the morning has the costermongers and the early workers and the children sent out on errands and the horses and a constant unceasing Londonness of itself. This morning it has almost none of that. The street has the hollow quality of a place that has lost some of its population overnight and knows it. 4 doors down, there's a black wreath on the door. 2 doors the other direction, another. The pub is closed. Not the way it's closed at midnight when it runs out of legal hours. Closed differently. Closed like no one came to open it. The pump stands at the corner. A woman is standing near it, not using it. Just standing near it, as if she's not sure what to do. As if the thing she has always done, come to the pump, fill the jug, go home, has become a question she can't answer. She looks at you when you come down the street. The look has a question in it. Carnaby Street, you say, not this one. She looks at the pump, looks at you, looks at the pump again. Then she picks up her jug and walks up the street toward Marshall Street, toward Carnaby. You stand there for a moment in the space she vacated. The pump is motionless. The handle curves upward at its familiar angle, the posture of something waiting to be used, something that exists only in the context of use. The morning light hits the iron and makes it look almost warm. You think about the number Declan said last night, 50. You think about Hannigan's wife, somewhere in the Middlesex hospital in a ward that is probably dealing with more than just her. You think about the doctor with his notebook going door to door in the afternoon light. You go back inside. By 8 o'clock the building is awake and the news from the night has travelled up and down the stairs with the speed that news travels in places where walls are thin and there are no secrets. The O'Halloran's room above you is still silent. Mrs. O'Halloran went to the Middlesex yesterday afternoon. Her daughter spent the night alone in the room. Or not alone. The Monaghan children are with her, the little ones, because Mrs. Monaghan decided that the company would help, and also that fewer people in the Monaghan room might dilute whatever's happening there. The Monaghans, Brendan is better, not well, not by any measure well, but better in the specific technical sense of being conscious and keeping water down and no longer making the sounds he was making yesterday. His mother reports this with restrained ferocity, as if daring the universe to contradict her. Ground floor, east room, both parents sick, their children, 4 of them ranging from 3 to 12, are being managed by the eldest, who is 12, and apparently responding to this with a competence that no 12-year-old should have to have. Bridget went down this morning and she'll go down again this afternoon. She does this without discussion, without announcement. She just goes. Ground floor, west room. The weeping last night was for the man in that room. He's gone. In the night, before you got back from the hospital, before the city even got to full darkness. His name was Patrick Feeney. He was 28 years old. He worked at a tallow chandler's on Silver Street, and he'd been in London for 3 years, and he sent money home to his mother in Galway every month without fail, or when he had it to send, which was most months. He died of dehydration in a 12-foot room, while London continued outside the window. The room is quiet now in a different way from the O'Halloran's room. The O'Halloran's room is quiet with waiting. This room is quiet with completion. You know all of this by 8 in the morning. This is another thing about living in a building like this. Nothing is private, not even death. The building knows everything about everyone. It's not gossip, not really. It's the unavoidable intimacy of people who share walls and stairs and a pump in the court, who hear each other through the night, who know each other's routines so completely that any deviation is immediately apparent. Patrick Feeney's absence is part of the building now. It will be part of it for a while, the way the absence of something load-bearing makes itself felt in everything around it. The doctor comes back at mid-morning. You see him from the landing window coming down Broad Street with his notebook, moving with the same deliberate pace as yesterday. But he's not alone today. There's another man with him, taller, older, carrying his own notebook. The two of them walking in close conference, talking as they go. You go downstairs and out onto the street. He recognizes you. He stops when you approach. "How is your lodger?" he asks. "Still alive. Worse than yesterday, maybe. Or just differently bad." He writes something. "Is he drinking?" "Some. Carnaby Street water. Boiled." A nod. Something in his expression that might be the nearest equivalent of relief that a man conducting a medical investigation allows himself. "I told people," you say. "Yesterday, Carnaby Street. As many as I could." "I know. I've heard your name 3 times this morning from people on this street." You didn't know that. It sits oddly. Strange to have been a presence in other people's conversations, to have your words travelling further than you went yourself. "What did you find?" you ask. He looks at you for a moment. Then he opens the notebook. It's a map. A hand-drawn map of the streets in this neighbourhood. Broad Street, Marshall Street, Carnaby Street, Cambridge Street, Silver Street, Peter Street, the courts and alleys between them. And on the map, in pencil, small marks. Each mark a case. Someone sick, someone dead. The marks cluster. They cluster around this street, this block, this corner. Dense near the pump, sparse near the edges, absent near the streets that draw from other sources. You look at it for a long time. "The outliers," you say. It comes out of somewhere, some instinct of pattern reading. "The ones who are sick but live further away." He looks at you with the expression again, the one that contains something like respect. "What do you know about the Lion Brewery?" he asks. The brewery is 2 streets over, a substantial operation employing 60 or 70 men. "Not much," you say. "It's the brewery." "They have their own well, on the premises. Doesn't connect to the street water at all." He pauses. 70 workers, in the middle of the worst affected area in London. None of them sick. The shape of that is clear. You don't need it explained. They drink their own well water, you say, and they receive a ration of beer with their work, which is brewed from the same well water but heated in the process. He closes the notebook. And the outliers you noticed, he continues. The sick people who live outside the cluster. I've talked to families on Hampstead Heath. 2 women, mother and daughter, who haven't been to Soho in weeks. Both sick, both dying when I reach them. You wait. The daughter used to live on Broad Street. She moved to Hampstead 6 months ago, but she preferred the taste of the Broad Street water. He says this with a flatness that is trying to contain something. Her mother had a bottle of it sent up by cart every week. Said it tasted better than anything locally. The cold sweetness of it. The thing you noticed. The thing everyone noticed and commented on approvingly. The water that tasted so good you'd have it sent 30 miles. She was sending for it, you say. She was sending for it. He puts the notebook away. I'm going to the Board of Guardians tomorrow, he says. The local authority. With all of this. He gestures, meaning the map, the numbers, the brewery. Workers, the Hampstead women. I want the pump handle removed. You look at the pump. They'll resist, you say. You don't know why you know this, but you do. They'll resist, he agrees. Because I can show them the pattern on the map, but I can't yet show them the mechanism. I can tell them something in the water is doing this, but I can't tell them what it is in terms they'll accept. Not in terms that compete with miasma theory and 30 years of medical consensus and the general human preference for explanations that don't require changing anything. He says all of this with the calm of someone who has rehearsed this argument many times, in his own head, and probably in other rooms with other skeptics. But you'll go anyway, you say. I'll go anyway. He starts to turn away, then stops. The people you spoke to yesterday, he says, the ones you sent to Carnaby Street, could you do that again today? As many doors as you can reach. Tell them what I told you. Tell them about the brewery if it helps. 70 workers, no deaths. The pattern speaks. Yeah, you say. All right, he nods. Moves off down the street. You stand for a moment with the sun on Broad Street and the smell of the morning around you, and the map's cluster of pencil marks still visible behind your eyes. You spend the next 4 hours knocking on doors, not just on Broad Street, down the courts between Marshall and Silver Street, up the back alleys, into the courts that have no proper names, the accumulation of buildings built behind other buildings, the layered density of this neighbourhood where every square foot of ground that could theoretically hold a structure has been given one. You're not a doctor. You're not an official. You're a 23-year-old Irish labourer with a story and a destination and enough stubborn momentum to keep moving from door to door without stopping to wonder whether this is your job. Some doors don't open. Some open to faces that look at you with the blank urgency of people already overwhelmed, already managing their own sick, already past the point of taking in new information. You give them the short version. Carnaby Street pump, not Broad Street, boil it. 3 words, essentially. 3 words. Some open to people who are completely fine and haven't heard anything and look at you with the particular expression of someone who doesn't want to believe they're living in the middle of a catastrophe, but is going to have to. You tell them the brewery, 70 workers, no deaths. Most of them have family or friends who work there. Most of them know at least one person who's sick. The connection between those 2 facts, once you've named it, is impossible to unsee. A woman on Peter Street grabs your arm when you tell her. My sister, she says, on Cambridge Street. She's been using Broad Street. She's been using it every day. I need to go to her. Go, you say. Tell her. Carnaby Street. She goes, almost at a run, the specific speed of someone who is afraid they might already be too late. You keep moving. By midday you've covered 12 streets and talked to, by rough count, 40-odd households. Your voice is slightly hoarse. Your boots are wet. There was a stretch of the court behind Poland Street where the drainage channel had overflowed in the heat, and there was no avoiding it, and the soles of your boots, in their soft places, let the wet in immediately. Your feet are cold and damp inside the leather, which will stay that way for the rest of the day because you don't have other shoes. You stop at the pump on Carnaby Street and fill your jug. The queue here is longer than it was yesterday. Word is travelling. Imperfect. Incomplete. Disputed in places. You've heard at least 3 people today tell someone that the Broad Street pump is fine, and it's the air from the knacker's yard that's doing it. And there's nothing to be done about the air, sir, but it's travelling. The neighbourhood is talking. The neighbourhood is always talking. The question is whether it's talking fast enough. You go back to check on Thomas. He's sitting up, not all the way up, propped against the wall, the blanket over his legs, a cup of the boiled Carnaby water in both hands. But sitting up, looking at the room with the dazed, careful expression of someone reacquainting themselves with upright existence. "All right," he says when you come in. It's not a question exactly, but it's not quite a statement. Somewhere between. "All right," you confirm. Bridget is in the corner feeding the baby, watching Thomas with the same measuring quiet she's had since yesterday. Shiaran is doing something at the window that involved the length of ribbon and elaborate concentration. Kieran is asleep in the middle of the afternoon, which children do when their bodies are processing something the mind doesn't have the language for. "What's happening?" Thomas asks. He means outside. He means the building, the street. He's been in this room since yesterday morning, since the early hours of yesterday morning, and he has the contained restlessness of someone who knows something is happening around them but can only hear the edges of it. You tell him. All of it. The numbers Declan got. The doctor and his map. Hannigan's wife at the Middlesex. Patrick Feeney on the ground floor. He listens with the careful attention of someone who is using most of his available energy just to stay upright, but listening with the remainder. "The pump," he says when you're done. The doctor thinks so. Going to the Board of Guardians tomorrow. Thomas looks at the jug beside him. The boiled Carnaby water. "I drank from Broad Street," he says, "when I first came in for the first week, before you gave me the other. I know. If you'd kept giving me Broad Street water. I know." He's quiet, working through something. The specific arithmetic of survival, the near miscalculation that all sick people do when they're well enough to do it, the backward reconstruction of how close it was, how many things had to go differently for it to go the way it did. "That doctor," Thomas says, "is he right?" "I think so." "How do you know?" "You're not a doctor." "I'm not. But I've been on this street for 8 months and I can look at a map and see where the sick people are." Thomas seems to accept this. He drinks some water. His hands are still shaking slightly, fine tremors that you can see in the surface of the water in the cup. "I'll need to go back to work," he says. "Can't miss more days." "Not yet." "Monday." "We'll see." He nods, which is acquiescence of a sort. "You'll see." The afternoon is slower, quieter, in the interior sense. You sit on the landing for a while, which is the closest thing to outside that doesn't require going fully outside. The landing window gives you the court, the empty court, the unused court pump, The yard that nobody's crossing today with any confidence. The building around you breathes its 7-person, 40-person, building-sized breath. You think about home. This happens less than it used to. In the first months it happened constantly. The involuntary comparison, the superimposition of the village over whatever you are looking at, the river and the fields and the particular Irish sky, grey-blue and enormous and full of weather. 8 months has worn some of that down, not gone, not forgotten, but quieter, less urgent, the way a bruise fades, still there if you press it, but no longer announcing itself every moment. Today it comes back. You think about the river at home, the way water was not a problem there, not in the village, not in the landscape of your childhood, where water came from the sky regularly and enthusiastically and was available in streams and wells and the rain barrel at the back of the house. You think about fetching water from the stream as a child, the cold shock of it in summer, the clean smell of it, the clarity. You could see the bottom of the stream. You could see every stone. You think about what that would mean here. Water you could see through. Water you knew the source of. Water that didn't require a map and an investigation and a physician with a notebook to tell you whether it might be killing you. The pump on Broad Street doesn't look dangerous. That's the thing. You've stood beside it now, you've studied it, and it looks like a pump. It looks exactly like what it is. A piece of municipal infrastructure, iron and stone, built to serve people, built to help. The danger is completely invisible, smaller than small, below the threshold of any human sense. This is the part that unsettles you most, sitting on the landing in the afternoon light with the court below you, and the building breathing around you. You cannot see it. You cannot smell it or taste it or feel it. You drink it thinking it's fine, thinking it's better than fine, thinking the coldness and the sweetness are signs of quality, and it kills you anyway. From the inside, efficiently, quickly, the body becoming the mechanism of its own destruction. You think about the miasma theory. The bad air, in a way, in the worst kind of way, you understand its appeal. Bad air is something you can do something about. You can open a window or close one. You can put herbs in a fire. You can avoid the worst streets at the worst times. You can see and smell the threat and orient yourself against it. But something in water, something invisible, something that doesn't announce itself and doesn't respond to the usual defenses and kills people who are doing the sensible thing, the thing they've always done, the thing their parents and grandparents did without incident. How do you fight something you can't see? You don't. Not yet. Not in 1854. In 1854 you fight it by listening to a man with a notebook, by accepting a theory that hasn't been proved because the evidence makes sense even if the mechanism is still a mystery. You fight it by knocking on doors and saying Carnaby Street, not Broad Street, by word of mouth through the labyrinth of these streets. You fight it with information, the only tool available. You sit on the landing and look at the court and wait for the afternoon to move. Declan comes home with numbers again. Worse numbers. He doesn't say them all at once. He comes in, sits down, eats the food Bridget puts in front of him, and then, when the children are arranged for sleep and the candle is low, he tells you. Over 100 now, by the count he's been keeping, by cross-referencing with what he's heard from the street sweeper's assistant who covers this block, from the woman at the boneyard who knows everyone, from the church warden at St. Luke's who is making a list of his own. Over 100 sick on the streets immediately surrounding this one. That number doesn't include the surrounding streets, the courts, the adjacent blocks. And gone, you ask? You mean dead? 23 that I can confirm. The silence that receives this number is its own kind of weight. 23 people. 23 people who were alive 3 days ago, who woke up and ate their breakfast and fetched their water from the pump on the corner and went about their days, who are now not. Patrick Feeney sending money to his mother in Galway every month. Mrs. O'Halloran with her laugh that came through the ceiling. The hospital, you ask? They're full. Declan says it flatly. Middlesex University College, they're both. The admissions have backed up. There are people waiting in the entry hall. You think about the nurse with her admission forms, her practised pace, her question about the pump. The Board of Guardians meets tomorrow, you say. The doctor told me he's going with a map. Will they listen? I don't know. Declan looks at his hands on the table. 50 years from now, he says slowly, working something out as he says it, people will know about this. They'll write it in books, either as the time someone figured out what was actually happening with water and disease, or as the time a man tried to tell them and they didn't listen. You look at him. This is not the kind of thing Declan usually says. He shrugs, slightly embarrassed by his own eloquence. There are only 2 ways it goes, he says. Yeah. He blows out the candle. You go out again at 10. Not far, just to the street. It's quieter than any night you've seen on Broad Street. Quieter than December, when the cold emptied the streets of the costermongers and the casual traffic. Quieter than Sunday mornings, when the city pauses around its churches. A specific quietness that is not peace, but its cousin. Not the quietness of rest, but the quietness of something that has been reduced. The pub is closed again. Not the temporary closed of being out of beer. Closed with the finality of a decision. The street has 4 lights. 2 from windows, 1 from a lantern hung outside a doorway, 1 from the lamppost at the far end. In between those points of light, darkness, and in the darkness the shapes of familiar buildings become unfamiliar by night, edges blurred, the ordinary geometry of the street doing things that only happen at night, and when you're not entirely sure about anything. The pump at the corner, you walk toward it, close enough to touch it, you don't touch it. You stand arm's length away and look at it in the lamplight. This simple thing, this object that has been the centre of the neighbourhood for years, the pump that the Vinegar Works foreman uses, and the printer's compositor, and the tallow chandler, and the woman who makes gloves in the room above the pub. The pump that you used yourself for the first weeks before the doctor told you what he thought. Before Declan started noticing the Atkinson family's open yard and their unimpressed healthy children. The pump that Thomas drank from, that you carried up in buckets every morning, that you poured into the baby's porridge water without thinking, because why would you think? Because it was water, because water was not a thing that killed you, because the pump was there and was working and that had always been enough. You stand beside it in the dark and feel the particular helplessness of understanding something after the damage is done. The retrospective clarity, the way hindsight lights up a path so obviously that you cannot understand how you missed it on the way through. You were on the path. You were walking it every day. You couldn't see it. A shape moves at the far end of the street. You tense, reflex, the body's autonomous system, the general rule of London streets at night, which is that shapes moving at the far end of streets need to be assessed before you relax. It's just a man walking, quick pace, destination, nothing alarming. You stand by the pump a little longer, then you go back inside. The third morning. The building is changed again. Each morning it's changed in some incremental but real way, the way a room changes when you've been ill in it for a week. The smell different, the arrangement subtly altered, the objects that were in one place now in another, because the logic of caring for people reorganizes everything around its own priorities. Thomas stands up today, not for long. He gets to his feet, takes 2 steps, sits back down on the pallet with the careful deliberateness of someone who discovered that standing was possible but hasn't yet established whether it's sustainable. But he stands. Bridget gives him a look when he does it. It's the same look she gave the pot this morning when it started boiling. The look of something working the way it should. The quiet satisfaction of a process proceeding correctly. "Can you eat?" she asks. "Maybe bread," he says. "Plain." She tears off a piece of the loaf from yesterday. He eats it in very small pieces, slowly, with the concentrated attention of someone for whom eating is currently an act requiring full commitment. He keeps it down. You watch this from across the room with the particular quality of attention you've had for 2 days. The background monitoring, the constant low-level assessment of how he is relative to how he was, the incremental measurement of whether things are going the right direction. They are. Slowly, fractionally, but right direction. "I need to wash," Thomas says after the bread. "There's water. Proper wash." "Thomas, it's been 3 days." "I know how long it's been." He says it without rancour, just factually. "I can smell myself." You can too. The room can. But this is not the kind of thing you say to a man who spent 2 days on a floor in a 12-foot room. So instead you find the cloth and the basin, and you bring more water, boiled Carnaby water, and you give him his privacy. Outside, Broad Street is waking into its third compromised morning. Jon Snow goes to the Board of Guardians. You're not there. You don't find out what happened until later in the day from Declan, who heard it from a man who'd been waiting in the hall outside the vestry room where the board meets. Here is what happened, or the version of it that reaches you through 3 degrees of transmission. He brings the map with its cluster of pencil marks, dents around the pump and thinning at the edges, absent on the streets with different water sources. He brings the numbers. He brings the brewery. 70 workers. Not one sick. Their own well. Their ration of beer from the same well. He brings the Hampstead women. The mother and daughter who had water sent from Broad Street because they like the taste. He presents it all with the steady, specific calm of a man who's been building this argument for a long time and has learned to make it without letting his urgency show, because urgency makes cautious men retreat. The board listens. The board is made up of local business owners, vestrymen, the kinds of men whose property interests and civic appointments overlap in the particular way of mid-Victorian local governance. They are not stupid men, they are not cruel men. They are men who've been given an explanation for cholera, miasma, bad air, the atmospheric exhalation of poverty and decay, and who find it difficult to replace that explanation with something else, something invisible and theoretical and contrary to everything they think they know. They have questions. Can he prove it? Not the pattern. They can see the pattern. Can he prove the mechanism? Can he show them the thing in the water? Can he produce in the terms of 1854 scientific evidence the direct chain of causation? He cannot. The science isn't there yet. The tools that would make the mechanism visible don't exist yet in their current form. He has the strongest possible circumstantial case and no direct proof, and he knows it. They resist. But here is the thing about men who are also practical men, Men of the parish, men who live in or near this neighbourhood and who've been watching for 3 days as the count of sick and dead on their streets climbs. Here is the thing about men who are not stupid. At some point, the pattern on the map becomes impossible to argue with. At some point, the weight of 70 healthy brewery workers presses against every alternative explanation until the alternative explanations start to give. They argue for an hour. At the end of the hour, they agree. Remove the pump handle, not because they're convinced, not entirely, not in the terms of direct proof, but because the cost of removing the pump handle is minimal, a small inconvenience. People will have to go to Carnaby Street, and the cost of not removing it, if he's right, is the number that keeps climbing. It's a pragmatic decision rather than a scientific one. The science will come later, confirmed and systematized and extended into the germ theory that changes medicine entirely. Right now, in the vestry room of St. James's Parish, on the morning of September the 8th, 1854, it's a group of cautious local officials deciding that the cost-benefit analysis favours doing the thing the man with the map is asking for. Remove the pump handle. You find out about it an hour after it happens. You're on the landing when you hear it from Bridget, who heard it from Mrs. Conley, who was told by someone who walked past the pump and saw it. "They've taken the handle," Bridget says. "You go to the window. You can't see the Broad Street pump from the landing window. You can only see the court pump still standing, still barely working." "I'll go look," you say. The pump without its handle is a strange thing. You stand on the street and look at it, and you feel something that takes you a moment to identify. Not quite relief, not quite satisfaction. Something that comes before both of those. Something more like the moment when a sound that has been in the background of your life, that you didn't even fully register as a sound, stops. A gap where something was. The pump stands the same way it always stands, the iron stand post and the trough, the water stain on the cobblestones where overflows have run for years. But the curved arm of the handle is gone. The part that people put their hands on, the part that made it work. There is at this moment no way to draw water from this pump. A small group of people is gathered nearby, not a crowd, 4 or 5, looking at the same thing you're looking at. Some of them look baffled. One woman looks relieved in the way you feel, the quiet internal relief of a decision made, even if not everyone understands it yet. An older man beside you makes a disgusted sound. "How are we supposed to get water now?" he says to no one in particular. "Carnaby Street," you tell him. "That's a 10-minute walk." "Yes." He looks at you with the expression of someone who has been inconvenienced by an administrative decision and wants to find someone to be annoyed at. Then he looks at the pump handle's absence. Then at the 2 black wreaths visible from where you're standing, one on a door across the street, one 3 doors down. He's quiet. Then he picks up his jug and starts walking toward Marshall Street, toward Carnaby Street, toward the pump that draws from the other well. You stand for a moment longer. Across the street, between 2 houses, a thin strip of sky is visible, pale blue with a high August haze. A kite is moving in it, a child's kite, flown from somewhere you can't see, dipping and rising on a thermal, doing the things kites do when the wind is right. The pump without its handle. You try to hold both things at once. The simplicity of this object, this absence, this piece of iron that is now not there. And what it means. What it might mean. The gap between the thing itself, which is small and practical and a bit of metal and a vestry board decision, and the implication of the thing, which is enormous, which is a theory confirmed, which is the first real brick in the wall of germ theory, which is the first time in the history of this particular human project of understanding disease that anyone has done something like this and had it mean something. You can't quite hold both of those at once. The gap between them is too large, but you try. The kite dips and rises. You go back to the building. The days after the handle removal have a different texture from the days before. Not immediately, not the way you'd want, not the clean line of before and after, the crisis ending at a definable moment. That's not how these things work. The pump handle comes off on the morning of the 8th of September, and the outbreak continues for several more days, because the people who were already sick before the handle was removed, and the incubation of whatever is in the water doesn't respect the timing of administrative decisions, but it slows. You can feel it slowing the way you can feel a fever breaking. Not in one moment, but in a series of small changes. The temperature dropping a fraction, the sweating changing quality, the body recalibrating toward normal. The building stops producing new cases. The street stops producing new cases. The numbers, which have been climbing with the terrible momentum of something accelerating, level off, and then, day by day, start to come down. Thomas is the first recovery you see fully through. By the 4th day after his first symptoms, he's eating properly. By the 5th, he's restless in the way only genuinely recovering people are restless. Not the agitation of illness, but the legitimate impatience of a body that has been horizontal for too long and wants to be vertical. He starts sitting by the window for hours at a stretch, watching the court, watching the sliver of street he can see from the angle of the sill. On the 6th day, he comes downstairs. He takes the stairs slowly, one hand on the wall, his legs doing the slightly uncertain work of legs that have had a week off. But he makes it down, and he stands in the passage, and he looks out at the court with the expression you've seen on people who've been inside too long. That specific hunger for outside air, even air that's this particular air, the complex Soho composite. Go slow, you tell him. I'm going slow, he says. He takes a step out into the court, stands in the rectangle of afternoon light that falls between the buildings, tilts his face up, not quite at the sun. The sun is at the wrong angle for that, but toward the light. He breathes in, out. The court pump is still there, still failing, still useless. He looks at it briefly and then looks away, toward the passage, toward the street. I keep thinking about it, he says. Yeah, that I drank from it every day and didn't think twice. He shakes his head. Something that's small, something you can't see. Nobody knew. The doctor knew. Suspected. He didn't have proof until the map. Thomas looks at the court pump, looks at the wall, looks at nothing specific. My father died of typhoid, he says, in Mayo, before the famine. They said it was the water in the village well, but nobody. It was just something that happened. Something bad in the air, they thought. Someone's curse, some people said. The priest said it was God's will. He pauses. If someone had known, if someone had understood what the doctor here understands, my father might have... He stops himself. You don't fill the silence. Some silences want to be filled and some don't. This one knows what it is. He was 42, Thomas says. He had 6 children. I know. I don't know why I'm telling you this. Because you nearly died and you're not dead, you say. And that makes you think about the ones who are nearly dead and didn't make it. Thomas looks at you. Yeah, he says. That's it. He goes back inside shortly after. He's tired more easily than he'll be in another week, the body still in its accounting phase, still tallying what it spent. But he ate breakfast this morning and kept it down without effort. He sat at the table instead of the floor. He argued with Declan about something. You didn't catch what. Something about a cart schedule, with enough energy to constitute a genuine argument rather than an invalid's complaint. He's going to be all right. The neighbourhood counts its losses over the following days, the way neighbourhoods do. Not with official ceremony, not with organised documentation, but with the accumulating knowledge of what's gone and what remains. Patrick Feeney from the ground floor. You knew this one already. His room sat empty for 3 days before a new family arrived. 2 brothers from Cork, young, frightened looking, carrying everything they owned in 2 bundles. They moved into the room without knowing what had happened there, which was perhaps a mercy, though you thought about telling them and didn't. Mrs. O'Halloran came back from the Middlesex. You hear her laugh on the 3rd floor on a Tuesday morning, and you stop on the stairs for a moment, 1 foot on the tread above the loose one, just listening. It's thinner than before, less certain, but it's there. Her daughter, who spent 4 nights alone in the room with the Monaghan children for company, has a grey-faced look that wasn't there before, the look of someone who watched something happen that no amount of time will entirely unhappen. She passes you on the stairs and nods, and you nod, and there's something in the exchange that doesn't need words. Hannigan's wife does not come back. She dies in the Middlesex on the 10th of September, 2 days after the pump handle is removed. Hannigan comes back from the hospital on a Thursday afternoon with the specific emptiness of a man who has just been handed news he was partly expecting but not prepared for. You see him on the stairs. He looks at you, or through you. It's hard to tell which. She was fine on Tuesday, he says. They thought she was... On Tuesday she spoke to me. She told me to bring a shawl. I'm sorry, you say. She was 31. You don't have anything for that. Nothing that fits into the space of 31 and a shawl she never got. She was from Sligo, Hannigan says. She wanted to go back. Kept saying, 1 more year in London, save enough, go back to Sligo. He looks at the wall. We'd been saying that for 5 years. He goes upstairs. You sit on the stairs for a while after that, on the step below the loose one, listening to the building. What the outbreak takes from the neighbourhood in total you won't know for weeks. The numbers come in slowly, compiled by the parish records and the hospital admissions and the Board of Guardians, and eventually by Snow himself, who goes door to door with his methodical notebook filling in the final accounting. 516 dead in 10 days. That's the number for the Soho neighbourhood centred on the Broad Street pump. This is not the number you hear in September. You hear the number in pieces, assembled from what Declan knows and what the churchwarden says and what you read in a newspaper. Someone leaves at the coffee house on Carnaby Street. 516. 11,000 people per square mile. 516 of them gone in 10 days. You think about what that means in terms of the building. Your building, 40 people, proportionally. If the same fraction taken from the neighbourhood had been taken from the building. You do the calculation once and then stop doing it, because the calculation produces a number that makes the room feel very small. The real number for the building is 4. Patrick Feeney. Hannigan's wife, a woman from the upper floor you didn't know well enough to name, who was carried out on a Wednesday and whose absence leaves a gap in the sound of the building. And one of the children from the ground floor, the youngest, the 3-year-old, whose name you learn afterward from Mrs. Connolly, who says it once with the particular gravity of someone who has said too many names like this and knows each one is a weight. 4 dead, several sick and recovered, dozens more in the immediate streets around, and through all of it, the building's permanent population, the ones who were here before September and are still here after, the ones who got water from Carnaby Street and the ones who got water from Broad Street and recovered, and the ones who, by luck or proximity or body or some variable nobody fully understands, never got sick at all. You, Bridget, Declan, the children, the baby who has been through this whole thing with the sublime indifference of a creature too young to know what almost happened, is thriving, has been thriving, regards the world with the clear, interested eyes of a person for whom everything is still new and none of it is frightening yet, because they don't know enough to be frightened. The week after the handle removal, on a Sunday, Declan says he wants to show you something. This is unusual. Declan does not generally phrase things as showing you something. He's a man who tells you where he's going and goes there, who moves through the city with a clear errand in mind and completes it and returns. The vagueness of something is not his register. Where, you say? North, not far. There's a hill. A hill, you say, because London is famously not full of hills, because London is a flat river city built on clay and river gravel and layers of its own accumulated past. Primrose Hill, he says, you can see the whole city from the top. You've been in London for 8 months, and you've seen large portions of it from ground level. You've navigated Soho and Carnaby Street and Oxford Street. You've been to the markets in Covent Garden and the docks at Wapping, on an errand for a man who needed a hand with some cargo. You've seen London from the inside, from the middle of it, the London of proximity and noise and close walls. You've never seen it from above. All right, you say, you go on foot. It's 40 minutes from Broad Street to Primrose Hill, north through the city, through streets that change character every quarter mile, out of the dense Soho grid, up through the broader streets of Marylebone, through the edge of Regent's Park, vast and green and almost disorienting after a week of compressed streets and the interior of the building, and then up the north side where the city starts to thin and the grass starts to thicken, and the sounds of London below you start to separate into distinguishable components instead of the general roar. The hill is exactly what Declan said and nothing more. A green rise, maintained and public, no remarkable feature except its height above everything around it. You climb it in the September morning, the grass slightly damp from overnight dew, your boots picking up the damp smell of it. Your calves register the incline after a week of flat streets. Your lungs, accustomed to the compressed Soho air, adjust to something slightly wider, slightly cleaner. At the top you stop. London. You've been inside it. You've been part of it. You've navigated it street by street, learned its smell and its sounds and its temperature variations, the way it changes block by block, the way money and poverty exist in layered proximity, the way a single street can hold a dozen different kinds of life. But you've never seen the shape of it. From Primrose Hill, on a clear September morning, London has a shape. It spreads south and east and west in all directions, grey-brown and smoking, the endlessly repeated pattern of rooftops and chimneys, the irregular punctuation of church spires. The dome of St. Paul's is visible, smaller from here than you expect, The city is so large that even St. Paul's becomes just a feature of it, a reference point rather than a monument. The Thames is a grey curve, partially visible between buildings, the light on it flat and pewter. The hills south of the river, Sydenham, Dulwich, the low ridge of Norwood, are a soft, darker line at the far edge, the city's southern boundary. And the smoke, every chimney going, even in September. London in 1854 runs on coal, runs on fire, and every fire produces its column of smoke, and the 10,000 columns of smoke from the 10,000 fires produce a permanent haze that sits over the city like something it exhales. From up here you can see it clearly, the cloud of itself that London generates, the visible proof of its own activity, its own breathing. Declan is beside you, looking at the same thing. I never went anywhere high in Ireland, he says. In Roscommon it's all flat. Same. The first time I saw this I thought, he pauses, I couldn't work out what I was seeing. Too much of it. Too many of everything. You stand there and you look. You look for a long time. Somewhere in that grey-brown spread in the Soho section of it is the street, the pump, the building, the room. That is 12 feet by 9 and holds 7 people, and smells of all the things it smells of and has held you for 8 months and will hold you for months more. Somewhere in that city is Thomas sitting by the window getting his strength back. Is Bridget getting the baby ready for the afternoon? Is Chauvin doing the ribbon thing? Is Chiron sleeping on the afternoon? You cannot see any of it from here. You cannot see Broad Street. You cannot see the empty socket where the pump handle used to be. You cannot see Hannigan's door or the black wreath on the family below you, or the room that is still empty where Patrick Feeney lived. From here, all of that is invisible, subsumed, part of the general grey-brown. And yet you know it's there. You know the exact shape and smell and texture of that street, that building, that specific rectangle of existence. You hold it in your head with perfect clarity even as it disappears into the haze. What are you thinking? Declan says. It's not quite a question. About small things, you say. He waits. The pump handle is a small thing, you say. It's a piece of iron. The vestry board took it off because a man with a notebook showed them a map. And that small thing is going to matter. I think it's going to matter in ways we don't have the language for yet. Declan looks at you. He does the thing he does, which is think before he speaks, which is one of the things about him that is sometimes frustrating and is always the right choice. My father used to say, he says finally, that you can't see the size of a thing when you're standing inside it. You let that sit. He meant the famine, Declan says. I think. We were inside it and we couldn't see the shape of it. We could only see what was in front of us. And now I can see the shape of it, because it's behind me. He pauses. Some of it's behind me. The smoke above the city moves in its slow thermal patterns, the constant gentle upheaval of warm air rising from 10,000 fires. A flock of birds, starlings, by the movement, the way they turn as one, lifts from somewhere below and crosses toward the park, the mass of them wheeling and condensing and spreading with the beautiful geometric efficiency of creatures doing what they do without thinking about it. We'll know, you say. Some day, we'll know what it was that was in the water. We'll have a name for it, and a way to see it, and a way to kill it. You think so? The doctor thinks so, and he thinks things in a particular way, that man. He doesn't think things unless the evidence is pointing. Declan considers this. And until then, he says, until then we boil the water. He almost laughs. Not quite, but almost. You stand on Primrose Hill and look at London in September, and the city breathes its smoky breath, and the river curves its pewter curve, and somewhere in the middle of all of it, invisible from here, a pump stands without its handle in a Soho street. Small and enormous, both at once. The weeks after. October comes in with the particular London autumn energy of a city rediscovering itself after a crisis, the way a person moves after illness, cautiously at first, then with increasing conviction, then at full pace, as if to make up for lost time. Broad Street gets its costermongers back. The pub reopens. The traffic resumes its ordinary rhythm of horses and carts and pedestrians, and the constant competing priorities of a city that has 17 things happening on every block simultaneously. The pump gets its handle back. This is the thing about 1854, the pump gets its handle back. By December. The vestry board, satisfied that the immediate crisis is over, and under pressure from residents who find Carnaby Street inconvenient, reinstalls the handle and reopens the pump. Snow protests, in writing, formally to the board. They acknowledge the protest and reinstall the handle. This is how it goes. The crisis passes. The inconvenience remains. The decision that saved lives becomes the decision that caused inconvenience, and inconvenience wins in the immediate accounting. The pump is back in operation by winter. You use Carnaby Street anyway. You keep doing this for the rest of your time on Broad Street, even after the crisis, even when every other household goes back to the closer option. You've been to Carnaby Street every day for months, and it's 6 minutes extra. You've measured it precisely, and it's exactly 6 minutes. And 6 minutes is nothing. 6 minutes is nothing at all. Thomas uses Carnaby Street too. He doesn't say why, doesn't make a speech about it. One morning he just picks up the bucket and walks the right direction, and that's that. Nobody in the room asks. The winter is cold. The kind of London cold that is less about temperature. London rarely gets genuinely cold, genuinely freezing, and more about penetration. The damp gets in. It gets into the walls and the floors and the clothes and the bones. The fire in the room barely keeps ahead of it. The window with its 4-inch opening stays closed from October to March, and the room exists in a sealed state. 7 people's warmth and breath and smell contained by 12 by 9-foot walls. You learn to sleep in your coat. Thomas learns it too, having arrived from Mayo expecting London to be less cold than this, which is a misconception that many Irish emigrants bring with them and discard within the first winter. The tallow candles burn fast in the cold, faster than in summer, the wax stiffer and less efficient. You start sharing them more carefully, stretching the evening light by sitting close to a single candle instead of burning 2. You read when you can. Bridget has 3 books, a Bible, a volume of someone's collected sermons that she uses primarily as a flat surface, and a small printed novel with a broken spine that you've read twice and would read again. You borrow a newspaper when you can find one, reading it in order from front to back, reading the advertisements as carefully as the news, because the advertisements are their own kind of document, their own window into what the city is and what it wants and what it can afford. You read about Snow, his paper, the full version, the detailed account of the Broad Street investigation, makes it into the newspapers in fragments, in summaries, in the reports of the medical journalists who cover such things. You read a summary in a paper someone has left at the coffee house, a half column on an inside page, the kind of article that is reporting on something without being entirely sure how important it is. You read it twice. The map, The numbers, the brewery workers, described with the same simplicity that Snow described them to you on the street. The Hampstead women with their bottled Broad Street water. The Atkinsons with their private well. 516 dead. Reading it in print is different from knowing it in lived experience. The lived experience is particular. It's Patrick Feeney and Hannigan's wife and Thomas's grey face in the corner. The print version is a theory, an argument, a contribution to the scientific conversation about how cholera spreads. Both of these are true. Both are the same event. You fold the paper, keep it, tucked into the Bible that serves as the room's flat surface. Declan gets work at a better place in February, a furniture workshop near Holborn, steadier hours, a shilling more a week. He comes home the evening he secures it with something in his bearing that is as close to pleased as Declan gets, a slight elevation, a fraction more ease in the set of his shoulders. Bridget names the baby. Finally. Formally. She takes her to St. Patrick's on Soho Square on a cold Tuesday morning in January, and the baby's name is Mare. And when Bridget says the name out loud for the first time in the room, you can see something settle in her, some decision finalised. Mare, who came into the world in a room above a cholera outbreak and slept through the worst of it in a nest of old coats, perfectly indifferent, perfectly safe. Who will grow up speaking London Irish, the mixed accent of the first-generation immigrant, carrying both places in her vowels, who will not remember any of this, who will only know it from being told. Thomas leaves in March. It's the right time for it. He's been well for 5 months. He's saved enough from the tanning yard for a deposit on a smaller room of his own, a room shared with just one other person, which in this neighbourhood counts as spacious. He packs his few things in the bundle he arrived with, or one very similar to it. He shakes your hand at the door. Carnaby Street, he says. Always, you say. He nods, goes down the stairs. You hear his footsteps on the loose 3rd step, and on the wobbling 7th, and then on the passage, and then out. The corner where he slept is just a corner now. A new lodger comes within the week, a woman from Galway, 50s, smelling of the same tannery district as Thomas, which suggests she's found work in the same area. She has the practiced self-sufficiency of someone who has been managing on her own for years, who does not require orientation or explanation, who will assess her situation and adapt to it quietly and completely without making demands on anyone. You tell her about Carnaby Street on her first morning. She looks at you, looks at the direction of Broad Street. The pump out there's no good. The one on this street is fine, you say, but Carnaby Street is better. She reads something in your face. Right, she says. She picks up her jug, walks the right direction. Spring comes back. The specific spring smell of London, which is not the spring smell of anywhere else, is not clear air and green things, but is the grey city doing a slightly different version of itself. The damp walls drying fractionally, the cold smoke mixing with something that is tentatively less heavy, arrives in March and becomes more certain by April. The building breathes differently in spring. The window opens 4 inches again. The sounds of the street come in. The returning costermongers, the later evenings, the children on the court in the hour before dark, the particular quality of light that bounces off the light-well walls and gets into the room at a different angle. You've been here 14 months now. You know every step of every staircase. You know the specific creak of the 7th step, and the gap at the loose 3rd one, and the way the main beam voices itself at 6 in the morning when the floor above shifts. You know the sound the court pump makes, still failing, making even less water now, versus the sound of the Carnaby Street pump, which you can reproduce in your head so precisely that you sometimes hear it in the almost sleep between 4 and 5 in the morning. You know which suppliers to trust and which ones are supplementing their product with chalk. You know which workers on the morning shift at the tannery can be persuaded to look the other way, and which ones are zealous about it. You know the timing of the night watch on this block, and the names of 2 of the 3 watchmen, and the shortcut through the court behind the vinegar works that saves 4 minutes when you're late. You're becoming this city. It's happening slowly, the way weather changes gradually enough that you don't notice any single day, but look back and find that everything is different. You came here with the village still in you, the village primary, London layered over it thinly. Now it's starting to invert. London is primary, the village is underneath, still there, still real, but underneath. You notice it in small ways. When someone asks where you're from, you say Roscommon first, and then add London, like it's an afterthought, an additional place. Then one day you say London first. You don't notice you've done it until after. You think about this for a day, what it means, whether it means anything. It means something. And then the evenings of spring, when the work is done and the room is its most bearable, and the 4-inch window admits actual warmth from outside, actual spring, the city doing its version of softening. On these evenings you sometimes sit on the landing, not for information, not to listen for trouble, just to sit. The landier's window looks onto the court where the pump has stopped producing anything at all now, fully failed, the mechanism given up. Someone will fix it eventually. Possibly. The Board of Works has been notified twice. The notification has been acknowledged. Further notification is probably required. You sit and you think about the past year. 516. That number. Which is at the same time a statistic and a collection of specific people, specific rooms, specific mornings when someone woke up feeling wrong, specific pumps visited, specific water carried up specific stairs. You think about the doctor with his notebook, where he is now, still practicing presumably, still thinking about water, still building the argument paper by paper, case by case, toward the moment when someone with the tools to see the mechanism finally looks. You think about how long that takes, how long it takes for the right person to have the right idea at the right moment with the right tools available. How many generations of people die of things that will one day be preventable in the gap between the intuition and the proof? How many fathers die of typhoid in Mayo while someone somewhere is 2 decades away from understanding why? You think about what it means to be one person in the middle of a thing that's larger than any one person. To be in the building on the street with the pump in September, in the specific year when someone finally starts to understand what water can carry. To be one of the people who said Carnaby Street and knocked on doors and maybe, possibly, shifted some small fraction of what happened. You'll never know. You can't calculate it. You have no way of knowing how many of the people you spoke to listened, and how many of those would have gotten sick if they hadn't, and how many of the ones who didn't get sick would have died. The counterfactual is perfectly invisible. The lives that didn't end because of a conversation in a street, the children who are alive and will always be alive and will never know the thing that didn't happen to them. That's the shape of it. That's what it feels like to be a small person in a large event. You act, and then you can't see the full consequence of your action, and you'll never see it, and you do it anyway. Because the alternative is not doing it. Summer again. the return of the smell, the anniversary of it without being the anniversary. August again, the same heat, the same Soho air, the same pump on the corner of Broad Street working as if nothing happened, its handle back in place, its cold, sweet water available to anyone who wants it. You do not want it. You go to Carnaby Street. On the morning of August 31st, exactly 1 year after you first heard Thomas in the corner, you go to Carnaby Street with the big bucket and the jug, and you stand in the queue, and you work the handle, and you fill them both with water that you know, as well as you can know anything in 1854, is as safe as water gets in this city. You carry them back up the stairs, compensating for the 7th step's wobble, avoiding the loose 3rd step. The room smells of what it smells of. It will always smell of what it smells of. This is not going to change. The walls are not going to move back. The window is not going to get bigger. The building is not going to acquire a second pump in the court that works. But there's a lit fire and a pot of water already heating, and Bridget is at the window with Mère, who is almost walking, who is doing the focused wobbling lunge of a creature that has recently discovered that vertical is an option and is committed to making it work regardless of the evidence so far. Siobhan is at the table doing the schoolwork she gets from the woman down the street who teaches the local children in her kitchen on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. Ciaran is asleep again, the afternoon sleep tucked against the wall. Declan is at work. The new lodger, the woman from Galway, whose name is Mare also, which Bridget considers either a good sign or a complication depending on the day, is out. You set the bucket down. Water doesn't spill. You've gotten very good at not spilling it. That night, the summer dark comes late, the London latitude stretching the evening until almost 9 before real darkness settles. You eat supper standing. You have always eaten supper standing, and perhaps you always will, and this has stopped being a comment on anything and become simply the shape of supper. Bridget's soup, which is better than it used to be, which is better each month as she learns the city's suppliers and the particular arithmetic of feeding 7 people on what 7 people can afford. Mare eats from a spoon now, held by Bridget, aimed more or less accurately, the baby accepting the spoon with the solemn concentration of someone engaged in serious work. She looks at the room over the rim of the spoon with her clear dark eyes. After supper, the candle, the 4-inch window, the evening sound of the street coming in. You lie down on your pallet. The room settles around you. Siobhan's breathing first. She sleeps quickest. Then the baby. The underwater sounds quieting by degrees as Bridget settles her. Declan's long exhale. The sound of a man who has given the day everything he had and is now releasing the obligation of it. The new lodger Mare says something quietly to herself before sleep, the same low murmur every night, which you've decided is a prayer and which you've never asked about because it's not your question to ask. The building breathes. Outside, Broad Street does its evening things. The pub with its door open and the sound of conversation coming out. Footsteps, irregular. A cart going somewhere. A dog making its claim on a particular piece of pavement. The night watchman's call somewhere near Oxford Street. A distant human marker of the hour. You close your eyes. The room is warm enough, fed enough. The window's 4 inches of September air on your face, cool without being cold, the perfect temperature of a night in early autumn. Warm enough, safe enough, alive. Let sleep come the way it always comes, slowly at first, the thought still moving, the day, the queue at Carnaby Street, Thomas somewhere in his own room with his Carnaby Street water, the doctor with his notebook, the map with its cluster of marks, the pump without its handle, the pump with its handle back, the number 516, which is a number and is also 516 specific last mornings. Let the thoughts slow. They move less urgently now, less like things requiring action and more like things that are simply true, that exist and will keep existing without needing you to hold them. The village in Roscommon, the river and the fields and the light, the boat that brought you here, the cold January crossing, the grey water and the grey sky and the smell of other people's fear and hope, the same smell, indistinguishable. Bridget's face when she first saw London, the expression she had and never repeated, the expression of a woman who has arrived somewhere enormous and is calculating what that will require of her. Thomas on the stairs, a man from Mayo looking at a city that has no opinion about him, getting well, going to Carnaby Street, every morning Carnaby Street, let it go. The thoughts thin out, the way smoke disperses when the fire dies down, still there perhaps, in smaller quantities, in the corners of the room, but no longer a presence you're aware of. The boundary between your thoughts and the room's silence starts to dissolve. The baby breathes her small breath. The building settles on its old bones. Carnaby Street, you think, not quite awake. Carnaby Street. And then not even that. Centuries will pass. The Soho you know will become something else. The dense, desperate streets will be reorganised, the overcrowding dispersed, the worst of the buildings demolished and rebuilt. The privies will disappear. The pumps will disappear. Water will come through pipes directly into houses, into kitchens, into rooms that don't require anyone to carry a bucket anywhere. The Broad Street pump will be dismantled. The well beneath it will be sealed. The street itself will be renamed. Broadwick Street, they'll call it eventually, so that the name stops carrying the weight of what happened there. But there will be a replica. Someone will put a replica of the pump on the corner, near a pub that will name itself after the man with the notebook. People will come to look at it. Tourists mostly. People interested in the history of public health, in the history of epidemiology, in the moment when someone looked at a pattern on a map and understood what it meant. They will stand where you stood. They will look at what is essentially a piece of sculpture, a commemorative object, not a pump at all, not connected to anything, not producing anything, just the shape of the thing that was there. And they will try to understand what it means. They will know things you don't know. They will have microscopes that can see Vibrio cholerae directly, that can show them the exact shape of the thing in the water, the thing smaller than small, the thing that killed 516 people in 10 days on this street. They will know the germ theory that Snow was working toward, without yet having the tools for, that Pasteur and Koch and a generation of microbiologists will confirm and systematize and extend into the foundation of modern medicine. They will know why the water was cold and sweet. They will know about the cesspit 6 feet from the well, the cesspit that leaked, the contents of a sick baby's nappy, washed into the cesspit by a mother who didn't know, the contamination travelling through the soil, the meters between the cesspit and the well, the pathway that is invisible and fatal and was there all along. They will know all of this, and they will still stand at the replica pump on the renamed street and feel something, some specific gravity of the place, some residue of what happened there. That knowledge alone doesn't produce, because this is what places hold. Not the facts, not the mechanism, not the confirmed and systematized understanding. Places hold the particular texture of what it was like to be a specific person on a specific morning carrying water up specific stairs. The weight of the bucket, the cold handle, the 7 steps from the landing to the corner, Carnaby Street. Some things don't disappear when you understand them. Some things become more present the more you understand them. The baby who was sick, whose mother washed the nappy into the cesspit that contaminated the well. She recovered that baby. The records show it. She lived. She didn't know, her whole life, what her illness had set in motion. She grew up and had her own children in a London that was slowly, imperfectly, learning to clean its water. The human heart doesn't change. The need to carry water, the need to care for the sick in small rooms, the need to knock on doors and say, I think it's this. I can't prove it yet, but I think it's this. Don't use that pump. Please. Don't use that pump. That doesn't change. Not in 1854. Not in the years after. Not in the years a long way after. When you are reading this or listening to this, in whatever room you're in whatever city, with whatever water coming through, whatever pipe that someone designed and built and tested so that the thing in the water can't get through. Someone tested it. Someone always tested it. Someone always stood at the pump with a notebook. Let it all go now. The pump and the map and the notebook. The 12 by 9 foot room. The weight of the bucket. The cold of the handle. The slightly metallic taste of the court pump water. And the cold sweetness of the Broad Street water that everyone said was so good. Let it go. The building is breathing. 7 people, their breath rising and falling in the dark. The particular rhythm of people who are warm and fed and as safe as 1854 allows. The baby's breath smallest. Siobhan's steady. Kieran's, which catches slightly on the exhale the way it always does. The new lodger's murmured prayer fading. Declan's long release. Bridget's, even and sure. And yours. Let it go slower. The thoughts that remain are not thoughts anymore. They're shapes, impressions. The colour of the light through the wavy green glass. The amber of it at this hour, neither warm nor cold. The city outside doing its vast nighttime work. The constant necessary function of a city that doesn't stop. Somewhere, someone is at a pump. Somewhere, someone is carrying water. Somewhere, someone is sitting with someone who is sick in a room that is too small, doing the only thing available to them, which is being there. This is not a small thing. Being there is not a small thing. You've earned this rest. Take it. The darkness is complete, and the room is warm, and the baby is breathing her small breath, and the city is doing its endlessly complicated thing outside the window, and none of it requires anything from you right now. Rest now. Drift. Go. Good night.